Okay, you are live.
Good evening, Stonecrest, and welcome to 2021. This is our first meeting of the year, and it's a work session starting at 6:03 p.m. We do have an agenda, which we will probably have to adjust a little bit. But before we get started, Madam City Clerk, will you give us a roll call, please?
Sure. Councilmember Jimmy Clanton,
Here.
Councilmember Rob Turner,
Here.
Councilmember Jasmine Cobble,
Here.
Councilmember George Turner and Mayor Pro Tem,
Here.
Councilmember Tammy Grimes.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. This meeting is officially called to order, and according to the agenda, it says by Mayor Jason Larry. And I don't like to keep touching on small items, and it really is, but it says called to order by the mayor, and the mayor is officially out till March. And I know we discussed this last time. Was that just an oversight?
Yes, and I believe Ples did this draft agenda, and then I just copied it and sent
Okay,
it. So I will
all right.
make sure we get that taken care of.
Small potatoes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Back to the agenda and items that are going to perhaps consume a lot of time. But first, let me mention that Deputy City Manager Ples Joyner did call me, and he has a family emergency. He's not going to be able to be on the line with us. And I know the first item on there belonged somewhat to him. And that was a suggestion to move that item to a later part of the agenda. And there were two other items I know that were requested to be added. So Councilwoman Grimes, will you address your item that you wanted to add, please?
Yes, sir. I sure will. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. My item that I wanted to continue with from our last council meeting was the moratorium on the gas stations. Thank you to Attorney Hazard for helping with that document. And I just sent you those 3 revisions, which were very, hopefully very easy to fix. The moratorium, is that a document that needs to be shared, Mayor Pro Tem?
If you can, we need to have it so we can have some meaningful discussion. I wish we'd had it before the meeting started, but get it to us so we can do what we can with it. And in fact, we'll just go ahead and add that at the top of the agenda and see how long it takes. I don't think it's going to involve too much.
I can get out Councilmember Grimes, but I did not get your amendment. It might be caught up in our system. Sometimes takes a little while to get emails.
Excuse me. I'm so sorry. I was about to just say I could tell you the 3 changes if you would put the one up that you sent.
Well, Councilwoman Grimes, let's just get the agenda adjusted, then we're going to go into the details.
And that's fine.
Would you like me to send it out now and then we could talk about the amendments, or wait?
If you will, that's fine. Thank you. I appreciate you.
And the next item would be the Muni Code updates. That is already in place. The 2020 budget discussion with adjustments. And we wanted to add another item after that. Councilwoman Cobble.
Yep. Thank you. I wanted to, in conjunction with what originally I thought was a 2021 budget adjustment, but it applies either way, is some edits to the purchasing policy itself. So I wanted to see if we could add that to the agenda. And I've made some edits. So what I wanted to do was just quickly walk through some of the edits that I've made to it, share my screen, and then definitely send it out to everyone to review, over the next week or two to be prepared for the agenda for the 25th But I
So-
wanted to just quickly walk through some of the edits that I made to Danielle Matricardi. Hope I didn't just slaughter her last name, but she's the attorney with Fincher Denmark.
Thank you. So purchasing policy follows the 2020 budget adjustments. And we had originally put in the 2021 budget retreat. Well, the 2021 budget, but before that, we wanted to have a retreat. And that is one thing I was working out with the deputy city manager, was to make sure that we could have staff available to support that retreat. And since he's not with us tonight, we're going to have to work that out at another time and get that to you. But we still will touch on the 2021 budget and preparation for the financial/budget retreat.
Excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, ma'am.
I spoke with the deputy city manager regarding the budget retreat, and he would like for mayor and council to decide on a date to schedule it so he can prepare for it. But that's all he was looking for item D tonight, is if you guys could come up with a couple of dates, that would be good. I know at the last meeting, we looked at the notes and it said 60 days. So we're hoping that the council was able to look at their calendars to see that they were able to come up with a date, and that would be a necessary item to get back to the deputy city manager.
Okay, then we'll come back to that one, then we'll treat it that way then, if you don't
Okay.
mind. Okay, and there was another item that we kind of moved up on the agenda, and that is the status update of the URA COVID program procurement RFP for the P cards. And we have the Jacobs contract personnel, and in the CID for Stonecrest, and department reports will be last. And I will throw in a little treat. I know there's another item that we are all very, very interested in, and that is getting your COVID vaccinations. At 7 o'clock, Dr. Ford will join us to talk about your COVID vaccination program. Okay,
Excuse me.
I'm not sure if we need to have any action to adjust the agenda since
Let
this is
me-
a work session.
I
Is
do
that
have
a
a
question?
question in regards to the committees. Are we not discussing the reinstitution of any of the committees or working with any committees this time? Are we looking at it for another date?
That we tried to get on the last one. The mayor wants to take part in initiating that. We can discuss those committees. As a matter of fact, the CID is going to be one of those committees. So we can add it to the discussion about the CID and the CID committee,
Okay,
as where we are going with the reconstitution of the committees, but that is to be initiated by the mayor and approved by city council.
okay,
So
that's
it's a
fine.
matter of us getting them together and lobbying the mayor to make sure that we get these committees on the move.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
So let's talk about it some more when we get to the CID and the CID committee.
All right.
Excuse
All
me,
right.
Mayor Pro Tem. There were a lot of changes to, not changes, but moving around on the agenda. Is there a way that you could just go over that one more time so I can rearrange the agenda?
Okay. Number one, moratorium on gas stations.
Okay,
2, muni code discussion.
okay,
2020 budget discussion.
okay,
Purchasing policy discussion.
okay,
2021 budget and retreat discussion.
okay,
Status update for 3 items. That's the URA, the COVID program, and the procurement services for the P-card audit.
okay,
And Jacobs, well, let's say contract and personnel
Okay,
and the CID committee for Stonecrest.
okay, and then number 9 would be the departmental briefing.
Department reports, yes.
Okay, and then at 7 p.m. we're going to break for Dr. Ford, correct?
Whenever she joins us, but right now it's scheduled roughly 7 p.m.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Now, Councilwoman Grimes, moratorium on gas station.
I just sent out the updated with Councilmember Grimes' edits.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad it came through because remember, I have technical issues. I can't use my Stonecrest stuff, so I am really trying to recover. But the discussion was, and I've received much communication from constituents in District 5 concerning just what seems to be an abundance or a proliferation of gas stations. And I've had some conversation with some city staff about the number of gas stations that we have currently, somewhere around 26 just in the city. And when you come to District 5, we have some that are less than 700 feet, 750 feet from each other. One's a little over 1,000 feet from the next one. And it's just a lot. We approved, I know, some in District 2. Then there's one in District 2 that's coming up that we did not have any conversation surrounding or didn't need our approval, apparently. And it's becoming something that, you know, the constituents are talking about. And so I know that we're in the process of having our zoning looked at and making sure that we have everything that we need to operate maximally. And so I just thought it would be prudent if we, you know, if I took, again, when I raised my hand, I said, when I campaigned, if you tell me something, I want to make sure that I've had conversation with you and that I am doing, in fact, in this capacity, what I'm supposed to be doing. And that's really what is good for the city with constituent conversation. And so that's where I am with it. I'd like for us to consider the document that Attorney Hazard has prepared for us. And that would be a moratorium of, if I can pull back up. You sent it to our Stonecrest email, is that correct? I want to make sure I got it
Yes.
back up. Attorney Hazard, okay. Making sure that we have, just have this in place, especially until we get through with our zoning piece. And also, we do have a comprehensive plan that we, before I became the representative for District 5, that was in place. The comprehensive plan was in place, and I know that there were some citizens who really worked on it, and you know, it was approved and it's here for the city to use. And just want to make sure that we do due diligence and making sure that we take into consideration what's in our comp plan, make sure that our zoning is appropriate for what we want it to be appropriate for, and make sure that we're hearing our constituents at the same time without doing a disservice to those who want to do business with the city of Stonecrest. That is not what we're trying to do, is to say, hey, you're not welcome. But what we have to do is say, hey, pump the brakes. Let's make sure that this is a community benefit for all. And so that's where I am. So Attorney Hazard, Mr. Bale, could you give Attorney Hazard permission to share, or if you want to send it to Mr. Bale for him to share? It doesn't.
She can share it.
That's okay. Okay.
She can share it.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, is this the right thing? Nope, wrong screen. 1 second. How do I unshare the screen? Oh, good.
I think it should be a stop somewhere. This is my team, so this is.
Okay, let me find the right screen. Here we go. Maybe that was the right screen. Do you see the deed? I mean, the ordinance, I'm sorry.
Yes, let me get my.
Okay, sorry, on
wonderful
my computer, there was a deed, and so I was like, okay.
So, if I might ask, do we need to read this aloud, or can everybody see this and make some comments? Because Attorney Hazard would be able to make the changes immediately. Yes, am I to?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And so, Councilman Clanton, Councilman Turner, and Councilwoman Cobble, if you all could put your eyes on this. I don't know how long we have to take a look at this, but if you will, please, just give this your undivided attention.
Can I just go to a specific area, Councilwoman?
Oh, sure.
My concern has been, and you hit it right on the head with the distance between them. I mean, we're talking about now approximately a mile apart. Before then, we were talking about 1,500 feet, which is like a third of a mile. So I'm just saying we need to have some distance with those in place. I know I talked to Chris earlier at one of the meetings, and he had said maybe within a mile radius, we had about 6 or 7, which is just entirely too many. So for those that are forthcoming, if there are approval on our end, then a minimum of 1 mile, approximately 1 mile, I think was distance for that.
Okay, and so that 5,500 feet comes out to be 1.042 miles.
Oh, good, right, perfect.
And if I could offer some clarity, the moratorium, the language in the moratorium does not need to be the exact same as what the language will be in the final ordinance. This is just holding things in place so that you all have time to discuss what you want the final ordinance to say. And so if later on down the line, after you all discuss and look at the CDP and all of that you want to change that number, you can change that number in the final ordinance.
So then my understanding would be then there's no real limit to the distance that we could put in the final ordinance?
Well, the limit would need to be something that's rationally related to a legitimate government purpose. It's sort of like our legal phrase. And what that number is, we could figure out, it would take looking at the city, looking at the gas stations that are currently there and where they could be, and deciding what distance will best serve the city of Stonecrest. And so it would need to be sort of an ongoing conversation, a conversation that I'm sure Chris and I would be willing to have offline to sort of develop that rational basis and that number that fits that. And so the point of the moratorium is to allow you time to figure that out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Let me just, may I?
Yes, sir.
Let me just add that when you put a moratorium in place, it is to hold up any additional applications until we fix the problem. And the problem we see, again, is there are too many. So we're saying that they are too close to one another. And how do you say that they're too close? It cannot just be an arbitrary number to say, well, that's too close. What is considered the standard distance between gas stations, and what do we want to set as a standard in Stonecrest? And will it be extremely different from what is in unincorporated Dekalb or the city of Atlanta or other places? Where I'm going with this is that whatever we put in there is going to be challenged. And if it is challenged, I don't want us to be in such a position that we are so far out of alignment with other jurisdictions that we get quickly overturned. So based on standards set in neighboring jurisdictions, how do we compare when you say put them a mile apart, half a mile apart? How does that compare?
A lot of jurisdictions are somewhere between 500 and 1,000.
So when we go beyond 1,000, we are well beyond we are beyond what other jurisdictions have. Not to say that we don't want to do it. I just want to be ready for any blowback that we might get.
Chris, do you know of any jurisdictions that have anything beyond 1,000? I think Atlanta at one point was thinking about 1,500 feet, but I'm not sure what that number is. It was for a specific area of the city. I'm not sure what that number is right now.
And so I'll say this: I have requested the distance between each gas station that we currently have, and I'm sure that that is being worked on. There was a map that was sent, but it probably needed to have some numbers there. I don't know if Chris is on the call, if he wants to jump in. So have we not seen gas stations that are a mile apart in, I guess we would consider those that are surrounding us? I mean, even though we don't always have to be the follower, we could lead with it, but we don't want to do something that we know up front is going to cause us to have any, challenges that we can avoid up front. So, I mean, I'm open, but I want to hear from those who may have more answers. So is Chris on with us tonight?
While we're waiting on Chris, let me say one other thing. And that is that you put the moratorium in place to halt the permitting until you can work out the details. So some of the details that you're trying to work out now, you might want to reserve that until, once you get the moratorium in place, then you'll have time to work out those details and come back.
That's
fine.
fine.
This is what we worked out. This is the research we've done. And here's why we're doing what we're doing. Versus us trying to get all of the answers this evening, because that's not going to happen.
Okay, that's fine. Not a
And
problem.
may I add something as well? Also, I'm looking at the moratorium, and basically, unless the 3 edits that Councilman Grimes has in her back pocket, unless those address this issue, this moratorium is not a moratorium to halt the build out or collecting permits for new service stations. It's only for service station that is not within, for one, 1,500 feet, that, you can still get a building permit, but you have to be 1,500 feet away from an existing station for now, based on the moratorium. So we're, unless again, that's in section 1, unless again, we're talking about halting completely, then it need to reflect that in the moratorium. That's one thing. The other thing is when we do start talking about the actual ordinance, we do have to consider the fact that service stations aren't typically miles apart. As a matter of fact, they're probably all within the 1,500 mile radius in clusters, as in, typically if you look around most cities, including Stonecrest, you normally see gas stations on either side of the street, which is not unusual. Or you may see, in some cities, you see 2 or 3, or maybe 3 or 4 on one corner. Because that's a way of them capitalizing on that particular corner, but it also relieves the residents of those 4 stations being spread out throughout that same area. So now they're all clustered in one little spot. So we might want to consider when we start deliberating on the ordinance itself to look at maybe, setting what Councilman Grimes may be alluding to, setting aside a cluster that is a mile apart as opposed to a station that is a mile apart. That way we can have 2 stations on one corner, a mile later we can have 2 stations on another corner, or something in that is just a recommendation. So, those are 2 things that really just jumped out at me right away. The other question is, where did the 120 come from? Why 120 days? I mean, was that because you think that we're not going to be able to circle back and look at this in a shorter period of time, or is that just a typical?
Yeah, so case law allows up to 180 days. we typically like to start with 120, and then that gives a 60-day extension if necessary. Once you get past 180 days, the law gets a little shaky.
Well, yeah, I was thinking actually, you know, if we're going to approach it, I mean, you know, there is a possibility that we could approach it within 60 days.
So it does say if there's a final vote of the city council before the expiration of the 120 days, and the moratorium will expire.
Right, which will be 2 council sessions from now.
Right, so the 120 days is the max. If you all come up with an ordinance that is passed before then this moratorium would expire and the ordinance would rule.
And as well, this moratorium would not address any station that is already is licensed, or one that is already being built. Of course, that's obvious. But also the other thing to think about is stations that exist outside of the city of Stonecrest. Would this 1,500 feet address those stations as well? For instance, like you got the BP, or forget the BP, you got the Quick Trip, say on Turner Hill Road, that is not actually in the city of Stonecrest. So are we talking about 1,500 feet away from stations within the city of Stonecrest, or 1,500 feet away from any station, whether they're in or inside of the city of Stonecrest? And should that be actually noted or totally ignored in the moratorium?
Well, Stonecrest only has jurisdiction in the city limits, and so it would only apply to those stations inside the city limits.
Okay, so in other words, if a person wanted to put a service station, say within a block of a service station that is outside of Stonecrest, we're good with that.
Well, I don't.
I mean, I suppose, you know, versus
off the top of my head, I don't know if there's a way that you all would be able to block that without saying that service stations are not allowed at all.
Right. Okay. I'm good. I just want to make it clear so that, you know, the minute you start issuing moratorium, people start trying to figure out ways to get past it. That's why the longest you have it out, the more opportunity for people to come up with, you know, ways to get around it. If our true intent is to stop the proliferation of service stations, then we need to, you know, act as if that's our intent. So if we put it out too far, and then we also leave room in the moratorium for people to actually continue to build out the service stations, it's just a matter of 1,500 feet now.
Okay, so let me ask you, Attorney Hazard. Thank you, Councilman Clanton. I understand, I hear what you're saying. So I want to be clear about then tonight. The information and documents that we have before us now then is to basically set in motion that we will be discussing, we will have further discussion about the actual ordinance that we're going to put in place. So this moratorium is only for the time of discussion. Am I correct?
Yes, and to be clear, the moratorium is also an ordinance. And so it's not enacted until there are 2 reads. The difference between the moratorium and the final ordinance is that the moratorium is not zoning legislation. And so there does not need to be a public hearing before it's adopted, but it's 2 reads because it's still an ordinance.
And so does tonight count as 1 read, or this is just merely discussion?
This is a work session and not a city council.
Session. Okay. So then, okay. So I think I know what needs to be done next. So then I just need to make a motion that we are doing the moratorium for gas stations for 120 days, and all of that is subject to change. Yes, based on our discussion.
Well, I don't think you want to make I don't think you want to make a motion in the work session, but what we can just generally agree upon is that we will get this on a meeting, whether it be the next regular scheduled meeting or a call meeting for action.
Okay, all right.
Anna Maria, may I ask a question? I think it might be useful to define gas station / service station, or at least reference somewhere else in our, as is defined in our zoning ordinance, at section whatever, because the definition of what even is a gas station probably want to litigate something. They'll say, well, I'm not a gas station. I'm not a service station. I'm a convenience store. That happens. So I think a definition would be useful. Secondarily, going back to something that Councilman Clanton said, if somebody put a gas station 2 feet outside of our corporate and jurisdictional limits, I think that should count in terms of a service station within our jurisdictional limits. It's the same thing that we're seeing in Metro Green. Sometimes things aren't in your jurisdiction, but they certainly affect you. Because a lot of the folks who don't live within the corporate limits of the city of Stonecrest are going to certainly be affected by the Metro Green facility. By similar token, if someone has a service station just outside of our corporate limits and someone wants to put one 10 feet from that, well, they'll say, well, I'm not within 1,500 feet of a service station in the city of Stonecrest, but you can reach out and touch the service station that's just outside of our corporate limits. So the very evil that we're trying to prevent would be manifest there. And I don't know if there's anything in the law that would preclude the city of Stonecrest from counting a service station outside of our limits in terms of measuring the distance in our limits. Same thing would apply with a school for a liquor license. I don't think it's an excuse to say, well, that school is outside of your jurisdictional limits, so I can have a liquor store right next to it. So I don't know that matters. It might matter, but I think, Anna Maria, that's something that you should look at. And to the extent we can use gas stations outside of our limits, and that's the will of the council, but I think that's something that ought to be explored.
Can I ask a question too in reference to this? It might be inclusive in reference to the ordinance. Can that ordinance also include square footage of the size of the service station? There's also number of pumps, things such as that, or is that too specific?
Well, so right now it would not allow service stations within 5,500 feet of another service station or a permitted service station, regardless of its size. So if you add in the square footage, then that would essentially allow service stations closer than the distance that don't fall within the square footage. And so with moratoriums, you kind of want to be relatively broad because you're supposed to be sort of working out the details in the ordinance. If you make it too specific, then people might fall through the cracks that you didn't intend before you are able to update the ordinance.
Okay.
But again, I would like to just make certain that I'm clear in what I'm trying to put forward. I thank you, Attorney Denmark, for clarification. Because that's part of the point that I was making. If it's 2 feet outside of Stonecrest, we put another service station up there. Really, we haven't done our constituents any good. So, my point is, if we're really trying to issue a moratorium, then we should really try and issue a moratorium. But one thing that we might want to make certain that our constituents do understand, based on the timeline that Attorney Hazard has laid out, we're talking about March before this even go into effect, and that's the end of March. So that means between now and March, we can get untold numbers of licenses and you name it. Just before we get, unless I'm wrong, because we will issue the moratorium at the next city council session, I'm gathering, then we will do the first read, the second read, that's 2 more council sessions. So if I'm right now, if we're on time, look like we're talking about March. And
we can do the first read at the next council meeting, and then the second read at the February council meeting.
So we have to adopt
a special call meeting.
We have to adopt it, or we can do a special call meeting. We have to adopt right. But we can't, we can do the special call meeting for for finalizing this document, the moratorium. But when we get ready to do the first and second read, we couldn't just call special call meetings, I don't think, and say within a week, and we have one call meeting today and one tomorrow or something like that. I think it's normal course of business. I could be
not unless there's a public hearing. If there's not a public hearing, you can have 2 reads at any council meeting, even if it is a special call meeting. But I was just saying, I would say it won't be March for sure. We could very well do the first read on the 25th, call a special call meeting to do the second read and approve at that meeting. It could be done before February even comes in.
Okay, so
Well,
that's a good point. You know, I don't have a problem with that. I'm not trying, you know, that's fine. I mean, if we can do it next week, that'll be fine with me. So, you know, what I'm trying to point out is that what are we really what we're trying to do here? And if we're trying to, you know, stop, first of all, if we're trying to stop people from applying for licenses, then that should read that way in the moratorium, because it doesn't read that way right now. And if, you know, so right now we still have 1,500 feet based on this moratorium that people can still put service station up even during the moratorium. So then, you know, and then the other thing is we really should look at, and, you know, I don't know how we want to do it, whether we want to have some, you know, subject matter expert come in and provide, you know, distances and how these things work, but we don't want to cut ourselves out of, you know, the business market either. So we want to do what other cities are doing that seems to be working. So, you know, I don't think we have to come up with our own, in my opinion, our own, you know, set of distances that are, you know, that are not even, you know, it might make some of our constituents feel good, but it may not be conducive to, you know, the way a city conduct businesses and what the business marketplace is looking for when they do business in a particular city. So, you know, certainly we don't want to cut out the opportunity for competition. Like, for instance, where you have a BP and a Quick Trip across from each other, you know, that's sort of industry standard right now. So there's certain things we certainly need to look at when we start deliberating this.
Well, I don't want to put a time limit on these debates, but we have a very aggressive agenda this evening, and we need to bring some clarity to what we want to include in this moratorium, so that we can get it scheduled for a hearing. So Councilwoman Grimes, I know you were taking the lead on this, but still it's up to the complete council to make sure that we have in the draft moratorium what we think is adequate to do what you want to get done. Can we kind of summarize that so we can perhaps move on?
And that's fine, Mayor Pro Tem, but just to say one more thing. I thought I was clear in the beginning that it is not an attempt to stop anybody from doing business with the city of Stonecrest. That's not what this is. And so I want to be clear as to how this even came about. And so, yes, so if there's anything else that we need to share with Attorney Hazard now, can we do that? I know Attorney Denmark, you said add a definition as to what gas stations, you know, a true definition of what a gas station is.
Yeah, and then there's a definition in the zoning ordinance that I can reference in this order.
Okay, all right. And so anybody else have anything else that they want to actually put in? Because I think the 120 days is better to have and not need than need and not have. So I don't think it'll take us 120 days to do this work. But going off the advice of Attorney Hazard, that's why it stayed in there.
Did we settle on a distance, and that distance will only be during the moratorium?
Right. That's the question I wanted to ask. Are we trying to determine if we want to say a distance or not? Is that kind of, I guess, is that what Councilman Clanton was trying to get at? We're either going to say it's a moratorium and be done with it, or we're going to say a moratorium within 1,500 feet. Is that the thing that we're kind of bouncing back and forth? And if it is, I would just say that we take the 1,500 out and just say we have a moratorium on gas stations for 120 days and be done with it.
And that was my point exactly. I mean, if we're doing a moratorium, let's just do it.
Okay. Is that going to work?
What about in the ordinance? So in the ordinance, then we can't put a distance in that though, right?
Sure. Right.
Okay.
Right. As we still keep going through the zoning ordinance and the zoning update, we would definitely have that 120 days to hash that out. Right.
Okay. Then what I hear you saying is that we want to try to get this on the next agenda for first read of the moratorium.
And that's on January 25th.
That's it.
And we pretty much have the wording together. So Councilwoman Grimes, you'll send us out the latest, between you and Attorney Hazard, the latest draft.
I feel like I can speak with Attorney Hazard. Yes, we will.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. And if there's nothing that we really left off on that one, we need to move on to the next item.
Thank you.
And that is, I really want to start out with Municode, and I'll tell you why. And that is that when we had the discussion at the last meeting, we talked about committees, boards and authorities and so forth and so on. I went to the Municode to look them up and find out what was our last ordinance in reference to that, and found out that the Municode stopped at 2018. Okay, I understand it's going to take some time to get it updated, but while we're getting it updated, we had the ordinances listed on the website prior to getting Municode. Any ordinance that had been passed by the city was on the website, and that's where we could go to look at it and find out what's the latest with the particular item. But the ordinances have been removed. So we need to either get them incorporated into Municode as they are being removed, or put them back on the website until they are incorporated into Municode. Because unless I miss something, a lot is lost in terms of, yes, it's going to be pointed to you, Madam City Clerk, as to where we stand with the Municodes. Yes, ma'am.
So I believe Chris Willer has been working with Municode, and my video just goes, it works when it wants to.
Oh, we can hear you.
But so when we initially set up Municode, we sent them everything that we had, or that was actually prior to me. And so if we were adding on to it while we were trying to get it online, it would have taken longer, but we should be able to get those on there within 3 business days, as long as we have them all in order. What we do is we just send them over, and then they'll put them on the front page of Municode saying that these were updates. That won't be a problem.
Well, what happened to the ones that we passed between 2018 and to date, the ordinances?
They just need to be sent over to Municode.
No. In terms of knowing where they are, they were posted online, such that if we needed to take a look at any ordinance that had been passed by the city, you just go to the city website and there it is. It's not there anymore.
We're working on it. So right before COVID happened, we were trying to working with Adrian and then working with Anna Maria and Emily, and we were going back through and see exactly what we're all passed, and we were trying to update all that and to update the website on when the website was being updated. We are actually doing that now, and I talked to Anna Maria, last week about it. She's actually working on it diligently to get that all set out again, so we can put it on the website. And then along as well as put it on the Municode. So that's what one of my projects I've been working on.
So to clarify what Chris was saying, when we switched to our new website, that page was taken off because we got Municode. And so now those that we had on the page need to be sent over to Municode so they can be updated.
See, and I hear you, but I'm looking for something, which I want to go back to the open record request as another item that we didn't put on here. But it happened between 2018 and 2020. How do I find it? And I often refer constituents to the website, and they can't find it. And it should either be on the website or it should be on Municode. Municode's not updated, but it's been taken off of the website. Who do I go to find it? Is that you?
Yes, that is me. It can be for open records request. So if anyone needs one during the interim in which we don't have it on the website or on Municode, tell them to send me an email. They don't have to do a formal request. They can just ask me for it and I can send it over. They're all in my electronic files.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you to repeat this again, and that is that the standards for open records requests, because I've gotten some complaints and I blame it on COVID, that it has taken weeks and in some cases months, and there's been no response. So what is the standard pre-COVID? What was the standard?
Pre-COVID, there is no post-COVID either or during COVID, but I have 3 days to respond to the request. That does not mean that I have 3 days to give them the items. I have 3 days to tell them that I am working on it and this is when it should be available.
Okay.
So 3 days, they should have a response. If they don't have a response within 3 days, they need to contact me again. I've not received the email or something has happened. Also, we are working with Next Request. It is an application that we are going to put live on our website to funnel those to a app versus them going into my email, because I get 100 emails a day, every day. So the likelihood of me missing an open records request, it has happened. I've apologized for it, and I just get them the information as fast as I can. There has been cases in which they've requested documentation that is not in my possession. And if it's not in my possession, I can't give it to them. I've also had responses where I've responded to a constituent with the documents that I have, and it didn't satisfy the constituent's request because they wanted me to give them something else. But if you don't ask specifically for an item, unfortunately, I'm not a mind reader. I can only give you what you ask for. But 3 days is the response time. If they don't have a response within 3 days, send me another email. I am not purposely ignoring anybody's request. I just simply haven't gotten them. But we are going to initiate Next Request. Well, they'll be able to go online, put in their request. It will be sent out to the department head in which it goes to, and then the department head will be able to answer it. It'll all be centralized, and it'll be a much better, easier process.
Okay. But ultimately, you are, as it stands now, responsible for responding to all open records requests, or do some of the open record requests go to department heads direct?
Well, I am ultimately responsible for all of them. However, I don't have building plans in my office, so I know where to get them from. But as far as the open records request laws or open records laws go, you have to have one centralized place for open records, and that is the city clerk. She's the record keeper, or he is the record keeper. So
good.
It's not up to the constituent to figure out which department it is. They go and ask one person to get them something, and they should be able to get it from that one person.
Okay. Okay, then I just need to know how to respond, and our response should be consistent from all council as to how open record requests are handled, and I'll know how to refer people. And I'm not, yeah. Okay. Well, one other.
I would like to put it on record. My email address is my first initial last name, MREID @stonecrestga.gov, or they can email it to cityclerk@stonecrestga.gov. Both of those are working emails, and I receive both of them.
Very good. Again, while we're doing housekeeping stuff, not necessarily in your area, but Mr. Bell, had someone to ask if there was a requirement to post our calendar online, because they said we still had last year's calendar there, or at least the 2021 calendar announcing this meeting was not posted. So who's responsible to make sure that that kind of stuff happens, or who can address that?
I am to both of those, and the meeting calendar was updated when we got the information. It took a second because we had some confusion between two meetings, but the calendar was updated. Last night.
Okay.
So initially, if they had checked it on Friday or Saturday, there were some problems. I worked with the contractor or the vendor to make sure over the weekend that it was corrected. And they got the confusion settled, and it was done yesterday.
Okay. Now, I didn't want to pass anyone on. I just want to be able to answer the question myself and know that there is a process and someone we can direct them to in the future when the expectations are not being met.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, again, with MuniCode, I love it, but it has to be kept up to date. And if it's not up to date, Ms. Reed will be calling you as the point of contact, you and Mr. Wheeler. But those records, I'll have to come to you for not necessarily an open records request, but to get those documents, because there's still that gap of 2 years, but you're saying it's going to be finished when?
Are you speaking to me or to Chris?
Yes, that
Okay.
2 year gap between 18 and 2020.
Well, I can give them back to Adrian to post on the website if he can do that. I know with the new website, that page that we had was taken over completely by Municode. So I think that was the problem, but I can take those, give them to Adrian, and also give those to Municode at the same time, and then they should be up within 3 days.
Was 3 days from now, or just you just saying 3 days in general?
When I send it to them, so if that's tomorrow, they should be up by Friday.
Okay, all right, I guess I can hold on to Friday.
Okay.
Thank you. But again, it's the process that we need to understand.
To note really quick, anytime there's an open record request for zoning cases, old zoning cases, we do not have those files scanned in. So those files are in the city hall and they are in the case. So anybody who asks for a zoning case file previously to the city, it's going to be a while before we get those, because again, those are all the way in city hall, and staff is I have to rotate my staff from going in and out just for COVID related issues. So.
And I know COVID gets blamed for a lot of stuff, but I just want to be able to explain it and give someone an idea as to how long it's going to take under these conditions. And if we have to adjust that time limit, then let us be proactive and let them know before we get these complaints. Thank you, sir. Next on the agenda was the 2020 budget adjustment.
Mayor and Council, you have a document that has the proposed 2020 budget amendments on it. I actually sent an updated document, which I added a couple of things. I sent that out to you today to be considered before the meeting on the 25th. I'm not sure if you want to go through all of those. I tried to write explanations with all of them, with all the amendments.
Can you kind of give us a summary?
So most of the amendments at this point, it is for the 2020 budget. And so they're really just compliance issues, to make sure that the budget complies with Georgia law. One of the main things that's in here is, the purchase of the Sears building and the new City Hall building. Those were never in the budget. And it's essentially an in and out. We budgeted for the expenses and then budget for the revenue coming in from the bond that we used to make those purchases. The other big item that was in here is the amendments for the COVID money that we received. It was in a separate fund, but still we need to budget for those expenditures and for the revenue coming in. And so those were the two big items that were in the budget. None of the amendments are adding any new money to the budget. So, it's basically moving money from one area to another. And like I said, the two big money items, they were all revenue coming in and expenditures. So it didn't add any actual money to the budget. And in fact, for the general fund for the year, the fund balance, which we started 2020 with just over $1 million in fund balance. And we ended the year with $3.5 million. So it was an increase of about $2.5 million in fund balance for the year in the general fund. And
Mayor Pro
that's,
Tem, I've got some questions.
Councilwoman Cobble, go ahead.
Well, first, Travis, let's start with a general question. Then I've got some questions about the amendments. When we have an expense that comes in that was not previously budgeted for, and then we make an amendment to cover that expense, are we, when, I'm sorry, there's some background noise I've got going on here. When the decision is made to procure that expense, whether it's a service or a product or a good, are we not supposed to get that approval before the expense occurs? And so let me give you an example, and this may not be the scenario for this, but since it's in front of us, it's the best example I have on top of my head. For the utilities, right? The electricity in the two buildings. Okay, it wasn't budgeted that we would use those buildings this year for anything, right? Rather it was early voting or Stonecrest Cares or anything. We obviously, when we made the budget in December of 2019, preparing for 2020, we had no idea those things would come up, right? So we have an electricity cost for the two buildings that we used, but that was not in the budget, right? So although the dollar amounts of 20,000 may have been in a different line, like as you have on number one, there was 20 grand in public works, and we're moving that to facilities and building, but it obviously was not an expense that we had budgeted for. Should we not get those expenses approved before we enter into services that require expenses that we have not actually set in the budget?
under normal circumstances, yes. And I hope to, well, not hope, we will do that this year. 2020 was a little different and particularly difficult because I kind of walked in the middle of it, and there were a lot of things, and specifically for the utilities, I believe at the time there was money available, and then subsequently paying those bills as well as the ones that were normal at the end of the year is where we ran into issues. But so with me coming in the middle of the year, I had to create a lot of accounts, of course, because I didn't see where certain things had been budgeted for, or maybe they were budgeted for, and I didn't know where they were budgeted for, or didn't feel that they had been budgeted for properly. And so just trying to, keep up with everything, make sure everything was in the proper place. And then a lot of the things, it's taken a while to get a lot of the paperwork on some of these transactions to be able to record them. For instance, I think I finally tracked down all of the paperwork associated with the purchase of the two properties. And until I had all of that, I couldn't record the full transaction. I had bits and pieces of information, but not enough to record the transaction. So yes, I know where you're going with that, and under normal circumstances, and I hope that this year we will be able to do that. When a line item is in danger of going over budget, start having conversations with the department heads and figure out why is it that way and what's going on. And then the plan is to maybe bring amendments to council quarterly rather than at the end of the year, that like we're doing this time.
Okay, and is it safe to assume that, excuse me, number one, do you have it in front of you?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay. That number 1, number 3, number 4, and maybe number 7 would fall into those categories that you just discussed, kind of doing what we got to do to clean it up, but not ideal, and probably won't be doing that. Not probably, will not be doing that going forward.
Yes. And also, let me point out too that number 2, I don't believe we'll actually need all of this money. I've been in constant discussions with DeKalb County, with the tax assessor's office, actually trying to get a reprieve from some of this. And I believe, well, I was told on Friday that they are going to go ahead and waive some of those bills. We'll just have to still pay the stormwater fees on those. So that's there kind of as a worst case scenario number. So I'm still working on that. And so, but yes, we would bring those forward to you either quarterly or, if it's something pressing immediately, we would try to get that on the agenda for the next meeting. Because that's the way I'm used to doing things when, if, for instance, I know we don't have vehicles, but in a situation where someone wrecks a vehicle and we have to buy a new one, I would try to get that budget amendment on the next meeting because it's not something that's budgeted for.
Okay. I know Dr. Ford's waiting. Did we account for these property tax bills in the 2021?
We did not. My hope is that I'm working on now trying to file for exemptions for all these bills. Now, what I may have to come back to you on, because I didn't anticipate still having to pay the stormwater fees on them, but the cost shouldn't be anywhere near what the 2020 cost was.
If I could add to that, our property taxes, we should not owe any property taxes this year because we own the properties as of January 1st this year, and we are a tax exempt entity. We will not have to pay taxes this year. But because last year it was we didn't own the property as of January 1st, that's how the tax law is read.
Right. So that's why I'm
that would have been good to negotiate in the sale of the building.
I'm sorry?
That would have been a good thing to negotiate in the purchase of the buildings.
Well, they did give us some credit for the months that the previous owner had owned the property, and then we were responsible for the rest. But yes, that probably could have been negotiated.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. I want to understand a little bit more about the COVID money you have on here that we're adding. So I guess my first question is, was the COVID relief grant? Well, I know the answer to this, but it was put into a separate account, right? It's not in the general fund.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
That's and that's why you see those numbers start with 221 rather than 100.
Right. So when you say that we're making adjustments or budget amendments, there wasn't an official budget that came to us to approve for the COVID relief grant, right? For how those funds were expensed and really, I guess they all just went out. Not much came in after that one deposit. So
Right. So
when you make amendment to that, what exactly are we making the amendment to if we never had a budget in place to amend against?
well, and that's why I use the word add, because essentially here we are creating the budget for that fund. And if you noticed on the other ones, I used the word move. And then on the COVID, I used the word add as well
So
as
is
the
this the
UR.
entirety of it?
Yes, because from a city perspective, you know, it adds up to the 6.3 million. But, you know, from a city perspective and from a budget perspective, you know, we have some expenses where we reimburse some things that we purchased, but the majority of it on that second to the last line, the 6.1 million, you know, was basically sent over to, I think it was Municipal Resource Partners and to New Birth to be distributed. Like, you know, we didn't actually distribute those funds. We just sent it. So that's where the bulk of that money is.
Let me not totally interrupt because, and Travis, don't go anywhere. We're going to come back to this. We are going to take a break and shift to our guests because this is some good information that we really need to understand. And it may well be pushed to our retreat so we can dive really deep into it. But I understand Dr. Ford's time is very valuable, and we are quite appreciative to her giving us this time. So, well, let me just take another step. Iris Settle.
Good evening.
Will you be so kind as to give the formal introduction?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Yes, I will. First of all, Dr. Ford, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the city of Stonecrest via Zoom. We're happy to have you. As you know, since September, actually late August, we were in the process of working with the Dekalb County Board of Health in terms of making sure that we provided testing opportunities for our citizens. I've been gnawing at you, I'll use that word, for a while, just saying, please, can you come help us in terms of, since March of 2020, making sure that we had the opportunity to make sure that our residents were tested so that we could protect them in the way that we could. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have here Dr. Elizabeth Ford, who is the director for the Dekalb County Board of Health. And we'd like for you to kind of update us on what's going on as the COVID vaccines started. It started without us really knowing that it was going to start. So that's the one thing. And now people are calling everywhere trying to get to the website to find out what's going on. So thank you so much for your experience and everything that we've gone through as far as keeping ourselves safe. So we're happy to have you today.
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation. My time is really crazy today, as you can imagine, because we just opened up vaccination to the 65 and older group, and that has been insane. But I do want to take some time to share some information. First of all, thank you sincerely to the Stonecrest administration for assisting us in our COVID efforts. You all have been great partners with us from start to finish. So yes, COVID has been a factor in Dekalb County since early March. And, you know, we've seen our numbers wax and wane and wax at this point. And as of today, there are over 30,000 cases in the county, over 500 deaths. I will say, though, in the overall scheme of the districts, there are 18 public health districts in Georgia. Despite Dekalb's enormous population, I believe we're, depending on who you ask, either number 3 or number 4 in terms of population. We are number 7 on the list of COVID cases. And so while our numbers are continuing to rise, we are actually doing something good in that we seem to be keeping our numbers rising at least a lower rate than many other metro districts. Let me talk about the vaccine, of course. So when you say you weren't aware that we had vaccine, we sort of weren't aware either. Vaccine arrived on our doorstep on New Year's Eve. And the supply throughout the state has been sort of sporadic. I think that the southern and rural areas of the state receive vaccine earlier than some of Metro because they were pilots and they wanted to see how logistics worked before releasing to Metro. And so Dekalb received the first doses of COVID-19 vaccine on New Year's Eve. Our first immunizing project was our own staff, which we provided vaccine to. And then based on the governor's guidelines, our next group were our healthcare workers. And so later that January, first week in January, the governor announced that he would extend vaccination priority list would be inclusive of individuals over 65, first responders, which would include fire and police, as well as those healthcare workers that had not yet been immunized, and caretakers of seniors.
Okay.
Now, this is where things became challenging because initially Group 1A was simply healthcare workers. And once it got expanded to seniors, it just exploded the system. The state is in the process of developing a statewide registry for vaccination registration and vaccination scheduling. However, that site is not yet up. And so each individual district has been tasked with creating their own system for how we register individuals, schedule individuals, and then track individuals, because as you know, this is a 2-dose series. And so we not only have to track and schedule you, we have to go back and remind you in 21 to 28 days that you need to get your second dose. And so we opened up the website to allow seniors, folks over 65, to begin registration on Friday. We opened it up at noon, and by 2:30 we had 6,500 requests for appointments. By Saturday we had 12,000. I believe today we had close to 20,000. We don't have that much vaccine right now. I got 500 doses today. And so I'm sure that you are receiving the same volume of well, probably not the same volume, but certainly relatively comparative number of emails complaining about the process. This is a work in progress because none of us anticipated having to develop our own scheduling systems. We cannot schedule vaccine far out ahead until we know that we have it. And so we are scheduling vaccinations based on our supply, because that would be even worse to schedule you and then find out on the day of that we don't have supply. And so as we receive additional supplies of vaccine, slots will be open. I know that people have been checking the website and it tells them that it's booked for the rest of the year. It's not booked for the rest of the year. Appointments are unavailable because there's not sufficient vaccine to support that. So that's what people are seeing when they're trying to register or schedule, is that we had to close down registration because there simply weren't any more slots. Right now, as of today, we are completely booked up for this week. As additional vaccine becomes available, we will open up additional slots. It's first come, first serve. What we were seeing this weekend, much to my dismay, considering the demand for vaccine, was a very significant no-show rate. For example, we had 200 vaccinations scheduled for our BrandSmart site, which is our Saturday site, and only 85 people showed up. Now, that is unfortunate for us because there's plenty of people in the queue, but I also don't want to create a wait list, because then people are waiting, and then when they don't get their vaccine, it will continue to roll over into the next day, which will then bump people off of that day. And so we are really trying to figure out an equitable way of scheduling that ensures that people are going to show up, for one, and be there on time and get their vaccine. The other issue for us was that we were not anticipating that caretakers were going to be included in that group, because caretakers is an enormous number of that was an unknown for us. And I can't police caretakers. You know, I can't say, well, you only get 2 caretakers per person, because depending on, you know, your level of illness, you may have 5 or 6 people that are responsible for your care. And so what's happening is that one senior might register with 8 caretakers. And so it sucks up vaccine supply very quickly. So these are some of the challenges that we have in vaccinating. However, I am still very much committed to ensuring that we get vaccine in as many of DeKalb County citizens as possible. I ask people's patience as we try to navigate the system. I also ask them not to double book, because what we're seeing is that people are trying to register all over the place. And so that's probably contributing to our no-show rate, is that people are signing up in 3 different places and then, you know, not canceling these appointments. And so we have empty appointments. Today, we actually saw exactly how much we had scheduled. And in fact, at the BrandSmart site, we actually saw more. And so right now we can accommodate close to 1,000 vaccines a day, which clearly, based on our population, would take us forever to get everyone immunized. And so some of the things I have proposed is, once we immunize the healthcare workers, we are hoping that they then assist us in immunizing obviously their clients, but also assisting the Board of Health at events, immunizing citizens. And so I have been reaching out to, for example, some of the Black Greek letter organizations that I know have a significant number of doctors, nurses, pharmacists, and PAs, to see if we can get in DeKalb a day of service where they just come and volunteer on a Saturday. Because if we can get, you know, 15 to 20 docs per Greek letter organization, we could probably vaccinate, you know, 10,000 people in a day if we set it up correctly. Of course, that's also contingent on vaccine supply. And so there are a lot of unknowns right now for us in terms of trying to get this vaccine out. I'm very concerned. Also, our initial demographics that we've been looking at, because we collect the data when we register folks. Right now, the predominant group for folks who are showing up to receive vaccine are Caucasian Americans. They are not African Americans. We have, out of the, let me not make up numbers here, out of the, I think, 15,000 folks we had registered, I would say, yeah, out of the 15,000 we had registered, 13,000 of them were white. That's not the demographic that's having the worst outcome from COVID. And so we need to figure out a way to reduce some of this vaccine, they call it vaccine hesitation, and I call it plain old anxiety. But whatever it is, we need to figure out how to address it, because that same fear of vaccination is going to be an issue when we continue to see the increases in infections, hospitalizations, and deaths among those same groups of folks. And so we've been really trying to be intentional about reaching out to our African-American community specifically, and our other communities of color in DeKalb. We have a huge Latinx community, and we have a huge refugee community. And so we're working on trying to ensure that while we provide vaccination across the board to everyone who's interested, that we make sure that those folks who may be more afraid to get it are also provided the opportunity to receive it. This was sort of a last minute agreement about this meeting, and so I'm not really sure if you want to ask me questions about the safety profiles of the vaccine, or do you want to talk more about logistics? So I just wanted to give you a heads up about what our challenges are at the Board of Health, and ask your assistance to help calm down the population. I literally cannot respond to individual complaints, and it is not helpful to my staff for individuals to be nasty and impatient on the phone. Everybody is doing their very best, and when people are just rude, it's not helpful to the process. And also we have individuals showing up at the health departments. Vaccines are not provided at the Board of Health. So we've had people come in at 7:30 in the morning and just demanding to be put on a list. That's not how this works. And so I think that we have been trying to be very transparent in our communications on our website, letting people know when the system is down. The system was not designed to manage 20,000 requests. And so at a certain point, it just shut down. And so we're trying to work through that. But ultimately, we're looking for the state's system, which we hope will be up and running by the end of the month. And that should make things go a lot more smoothly.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Because I know, Dr. Ford, one of the things when we talked about the vaccine and we knew and we understood our culture and our community was the education aspect. Making sure that that we had an opportunity to share information so that people weren't afraid, so that they fully understood what was going on. And I mean, that could last forever, depending on the individual, making sure that people understand. But I think that was one of the things that that I was hearing, beforehand. That's why I asked when our contract was almost up, our agreement was almost up. I asked, can we please, give us an idea so that we can kind of get people ready, for it. So one thing that you can do in terms of helping us is, just communicate with us so that we know, because one of the things that we want to be able to do is to just let the citizens of the city know that this is what's going on. How can we handle all the calls that are coming through the call center by letting them know the information that you shared here tonight is very helpful in us being able to calm people down, for them to be a little bit more relaxed, for them to understand what's going on. And the education process, what's in the particular vaccine that they're taking, because we hear a lot on the news, but what is it as it relates to us right here in Stonecrest? So those are some of the issues from our standpoint that we're interested in, that, that can help, at least from the people I've been dialoguing with, being hands-on, with the people here in the city. So is that something that you could help us address in those areas? So even if it's a pamphlet or something that we could share, because we took the initiative to do a list of things that people needed to understand so that they could calm down in terms of numbers and understand that, you guys are working on it. So is that something that you could provide for us?
We can. Here's my frustration is that this has been discussed quite a while at the state level, and we were initially told that all communications, all educational materials would be provided to us from the state. They have a communications packet, but it's, to me, a little high level. I don't know that it would be very helpful. And so what I have been trying to task my staff to just give me a one-pager with like very, very simple information that we can post on the web, but we can also share that with your constituency as well in a separate setup if you like.
Yes.
If you think that will help. I'm also in between trying to manage all of this. I have, for example, a town hall meeting Thursday for Commissioner Lorraine Cochran Johnson. But in my opinion, it is a Dekalb town hall meeting. She's just happened to be a person that caught me on a day that I was available. But, what I can't do is 5 individual town halls for each commissioner,
Yes.
because that's just not manageable for my own mental health. But
Right.
I would love to try to do something large scale, like what we were doing with COVID, which I thought was very effective when we did the webinar and we did the Facebook thing at the same time, and people could tune in and ask questions online.
Yes.
I thought that was very effective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we're going to have to do, because I have to be mindful of my own process in all of this. And we've got a lot of moving parts right now because we're still doing testing. We still have one of the highest HIV rates in the nation, and we still have tuberculosis. And so while my current focus for the moment is COVID-19 vaccine, there's a whole lot of other things that have to be managed. And so
understood.
Excellent, thank you. Iris, hold on one second. Council, is there any concerns you might have?
I have a question for Dr. Ford.
Let's go with Councilwoman Grimes, I believe, was first.
I'm sorry. I just have a quick question because I have shared, thank you, Dr. Ford, for being here. I have shared the information about Thursday night's forum, so I'm looking forward to constituents and myself hearing from you then, but I thought I heard you say something about a one-pager in terms of information. Did you say you wanted to have that or you have that?
We're working on one.
You're working on one.
We have some materials, you know, obviously the CDC website has stuff, but, you know, I run something that's kind of like everything all in one small page, you know. It's hard though, because different groups have different questions. But we'll try to put, we also have, I think, an FAQ section on our website. I'll double check and make sure that it's up. But I thought, you know, we are trying to anticipate what kinds of questions people would ask so that, you know, we're ready.
Okay, my ask is, if you have that, when you get that, if you could make sure that gets to the council members here, because we each have, of course, our own pages for our constituents, and I'd love to have what has been vetted by our own Dr. Ford, Dekalb, for our citizens. So if you will, that's my ask.
Sure, no, I'll make sure Ms. Settles gets that and we can distribute it and ensure that everyone has that.
Thank you.
I hope to have you that by the end of the week, honestly, because I've been asking for that for a while, so.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to Thursday.
Councilman Rob Turner.
Thank you. Dr. Ford, I have a question in reference to, I guess, the amount of vaccines. Is there a maximum amount of vaccines that you can request for the county, or is there a limit to that?
Well, we asked for 40,000 doses.
Okay.
We got 500 today.
Okay.
It's coming in spurts, and that's also difficult to plan for. You know, I think we asked for 40,000 total. Maybe we've gotten like 11,000 so far.
Okay.
But in order to have a mass event, I need a big quantity of vaccine. So
I understand. One other quick question. You had stated that it's a 2-dose requirement in reference to receiving this vaccine. What happens if a person only can get 1 dose? Is that effective, or what happens with that, with them?
Well, when you say can only, I mean, we are doing our best to ensure that everyone get that second dose. Whether or not they receive the first dose in Dekalb is irrelevant. If they come back for dose 2, we're going to give it to them. Not having the second dose cuts down on the efficacy of the vaccine. It's dramatically less effective because that first dose is kind of your primer dose. And then the second dose is the one that kind of locks in your antibodies. So you really need to have them both.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else from council? Okay, general question before you go. I know you got a busy schedule. Anyone else?
Yes, I have one.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Dr. Ford. Can you give us the website that you were speaking of earlier?
Sure. That's www.dekalbhealth.net. And I will say that cdc.gov does have a lot of information. And, you know, I was very concerned, as I've spoken publicly about this before, you know, when this vaccine first came out, because as a scientist, I had my concerns. I was like, well, it's pretty fast. And, you know, what are we doing here? But the more information I get, the more comfortable I feel about it. I've been in this position for almost 16 years now, and this is family to me. So I would not recommend anything for you all that I would not recommend for my own family. And I did sign for my mother to have this vaccine after I read the safety profiles. And so it has been widely tested in communities of color. It has been tested, more importantly, in people with chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes. There were Black folks in there were women. So these clinical trials were very comprehensive. And so that made me feel better, because a lot of times Black folks don't participate in clinical trials. So we don't know whether these things work for everybody. But this one, both vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, were widely tested, over 30,000 people so far. And they're still following up with these folks. And so it is a blessing to me as a scientist to have anything that's over 90% effective. And so I feel like if we want to see any opportunity for us to resume normal activities anytime in the next year, this is the best way to go about it. Having said that, though, please be clear that getting the vaccine does not negate the needs for us to continue to promote hand washing, mask wearing, and social distancing, because that's still an issue.
Dr. Ford, you mentioned Brand Smart and here naturally at Stonecrest.
Yeah.
You have anticipation of other sites in DeKalb County opening soon?
The issue with additional sites is manpower. What I had a conversation with Mayor Leary this morning because this weather is killing our staff. Saturday was so cold. I was out there Saturday morning for a few hours and my fingers and feet were literally numb for the rest of the day. And I can't expose my staff like that. We've had people resigning because of the conditions. And so we had a preliminary discussion today about moving our operations indoors to Sam's Club, the former Sam's Club, and the northern part of the country, we're trying to identify some closed-in space as well. We have other events planned, but it would be contingent upon space and manpower. We can do as many vaccines as we have staff. And so both sites, I think Stonecrest and BrandSmart have the capacity to be expanded, and they're good central locations. Adding another site means more logistics for us. It's easier for us to just add people to the current sites than to create a whole nother site.
I understand. Okay, unless there are other questions, we want to thank you so much for your time, and just let us know anything else that we can do for you, and we'll do whatever the city has at their hand to assist you with.
Okay, well, you all have been amazing partners to us, so I really, really appreciate the support.
Great.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Ford.
you.
Right. Thank you. Take care.
All right. Good night. Now, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Grimes, you wanted a 10-minute break.
Well, since this is new now and we're not stopping to go to any other meeting, I think we're good, Mayor Pro Tem. Unless you say 10-minute break, I'll take it. I don't see that we need a break because
let's do that. Let's take an 8-minute break. It is what time now? 7:34. Let's say 7. Let's just make it a 6-minute break. Let's say come back at 7:40, 7:41. Mr. Bell.
Okay. Would you want me to stop the live feed? Usually we stop it because we have 2 different meetings, a council meeting versus a work session. I can continue this feed through if you like.
Yes. Play some jazz and let us take a break. Yeah,
continue it through. Be sure you put yourselves on mute.
Like I got jazz just sitting here. Okay, I'll figure out something.
Mr. Bell, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Okay, we're back with you.
Welcome back to everyone. Hope we have, I'm doing a head count. Yes, we're good. Mr. Councilmember Clanton, are you back?
I am.
All right, good. Then we took a break to hear from Dr. Ford, and that was very rich. And we were talking about the 2020 budget. Councilwoman Cobble, you had the floor. Were you finished?
No, not quite.
Okay, then you may resume, please.
All right, we have Travis back.
I am. I'm
Okay.
here.
Let's see. The okay, number 4. We've got move 50,000. But then in your note right below it, it says that was for cell phones for employees during COVID. Why is that 50,000 not being charged to the COVID expenses?
Well, at this point, we don't have any more COVID money. Like we've basically spent all the money. So that was one of the things that got missed along the way, because what I was trying to do was keep track of, I had to basically manually keep track of all the COVID expenses. And I had copies of, various invoices and things like that. But, I guess the cell phone bill and that stuff just was separated.
Okay. That's a little alarming. That's first of all, that's a grandiose amount to not have enough funds in the COVID account to cover. You're talking about over $6 million. But then that actually just leads to, I guess, the other question I had for number 5. Okay.
I mean, keep in mind too, I guess we gave all that money away. I reserved a certain amount that I thought would cover the expenses, because like I said, we had a running list of the expenses, but most of that money we gave away to the community.
Well, I'm not saying that what the money went to wasn't a good cause. What I'm more leaning toward is it was poor management of the good cause, not necessarily that it was a bad cause. Um, but I mean, even seeing that this is the first time we've actually seen numbers for the COVID fund, kind of help, but actually just, I guess, continues to it just really perpetuates the request that we've been asking for to see figures to go along with the COVID relief funds and how they have been expensed, and just seem to continue to have some difficulty with getting that report. But then to see something like this kind of just adds a little fuel to that fire. However, I do want to ask you a little bit more about um, some of the costs you have listed here related to COVID, um, and just kind of get your opinion on, have these things been vetted through what is considered an expense, I guess a legal expense for COVID relief. So the first thing that pops out is vehicles. One, what vehicle? And two, is that's a COVID relief expense that's provided for in the COVID Relief Act?
So, so there was a van that was purchased, that Stonecrest Cares van, that was in fact used to deliver meals to people. And so I believe that's a valid expense. The law was pretty broad, and there was language in there that basically said any expense that you incurred that you wouldn't have otherwise have incurred. And so I believe that van falls, and it was indeed used for COVID purposes.
Okay. And when you say you believe, I mean, is that something that we vetted through the COVID Act and a vehicle was an approved expense, or is that something that we're hoping? Or I mean,
No,
what do you mean by you believe?
I'm sorry if I used the words I believe. The law does state that any expense is covered that you wouldn't have normally spent in your budget. And so, we had no plans to purchase a van. That van was only purchased when COVID came about. And, like I said, it was used to deliver meals, some of the COVID meals during the meal giveaway. And so that would qualify it as an expense. The law doesn't really say, what you can and can't purchase, as long as you can justify it being used for COVID purposes.
Okay. And then does it mention anything about what you do? Obviously, that's short-lived, right? Because the program, we had to use all the funds by the 31st. So is there any mention in the act of what to do with the capital assets that you obtained?
There is not.
Okay. I'm gonna send you an email because I've got some things from the state side that say a lot different than what what we've seen on the state side of what can and cannot be done. So hopefully there's some different allowances on the municipal side. But some of these things jump off the page to me because we've had lengthy discussions on the state side about how we can use those CARES Act funds. And a lot of what I see on this list are at least things that we purposely stayed away from on the state side. The other thing that jumps out to me is furniture and fixtures.
Well, the furniture and fixtures was actually like stand-up temperature checking machines. I mean, it's listed as under furniture and fixtures. That was the best place for it, but I mean, that definitely is directly related to COVID. To go, I believe those machines are for the city hall. Well, I guess both city hall buildings, so that as you enter the building, it'll scan you and check your temperature.
Right. And are they in the parks? I'm assuming it's in Brownsville as well.
I think there was some purchase for Brownsville, but I'm not one.
So even though it says furniture and fixtures, it's probably more like I don't know, an operating supply maybe, or it's not couches and chairs.
No, it's not couches and chairs.
Okay.
I think the cost of it required it being a capital asset. And so that's why it's under furniture and fixtures. There are only really, I think, 4 or 5 categories under capital assets where you classify things.
Okay. And then my last question is, maybe is Winston on? This may be a legal question, but then again, it may not. Even though these were grant funds given to the city, were they excluded from following the procurement policy?
I'm not sure I follow, Councilwoman.
Okay, so if we had an expense that was, above the competitive threshold, did things have to follow the purchasing policy when expenses were incurred? Like a $25,000, I'm just throwing out an example. If there was a $25,000, $26,000 expense, did those things have to follow the purchasing policy? For competitive bid, non-competitive bid, if it was an expense that was below 25 but over 5,000, council is supposed to be notified of those things afterwards. Did expenses have to follow the purchasing policy?
I understand your question now, and the reason I don't know is because I don't know if the purchasing policy speaks to that. There may be a distinction between quote unquote city money and then grant money that we're distributing. That may be a distinction that matters. Maybe it's not, because once the money hits the city's bank account, it's city money, and you treat all city money the same, regardless of the source. And so I think that's a question that's significant enough that my top of the head answer probably isn't good enough.
Okay. All right. I'm asking that question more so not related to each individual expense, but when I look at it as a total, I feel like this is the first time that I've seen a COVID relief budget, right? So I'm kind of being asked to agree to the amendments to something that I didn't even know I've never seen a budget for, right? We didn't know how the money was spent, other than we gave some of it to churches and nonprofits to service the citizens, and then some of it we granted to small businesses. And then there's a portion in there somewhere that went to the city itself for expenses to make improvements to City Hall and things like that that we incurred because of COVID. So being as this is the first time I've actually seen numbers to expenses, it just makes me feel like I'm being requested to make an amendment to a budget I didn't know we had, never seen expenses that were charged to it. And so it kind of puts me in a place of limbo a little bit, that it makes me want to ask, what did we spend $20,000 on in furniture and fixtures? What did we spend $16,000 on in supplies? Did we truly only spend $381 in professional services? I feel like the small business program itself had a couple of professional services built into it that I'm sure we spent more than $381 on. The vehicle obviously was one that jumped out to me. Didn't know we had, I mean, I saw a vehicle, but obviously didn't know that we decided to purchase it. Don't know what we plan on doing with it now. So it just, there are just things that I have never seen before, presented to the council in a budget format, to then say, do you agree to these amendments, quote unquote, to a budget I've never seen?
So Councilmember Cobble, the majority of these purchases that I'm reimbursing the city for, including the vehicle, were made before I arrived. So I can't speak to what kind of purchasing process they went to. This is me, on the back end, attempting to get those amendments in there, because like you said, there wasn't a budget for this. And, we received the money, I believe, in late October. The majority of the giveaway was, late November and early to mid-December. And then, one of the things that I was trying to do was simply go back and look at the expenses that the city had spent, during the year, and try to reserve some of that money.
And those expenses were probably expenses that we had not budgeted for, but yet were spent anyway.
Right.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it just, I'm not blaming you by no stretch of the imagination. Just trying to put the picture together that, there's things being done with funds that, I think rightfully we should be aware of, and we are not, or expenses are being incurred that were not budgeted for, that are being paid prior to the budget amendment. And then there are just, there's just a lot of questions. There's just a lot of unknowns that I don't want to see a habit of, we're just going to do things and then kind of come back and ask council to ratify and amend. So I'm not blaming you, but I am a little uneasy about how some of this was handled. Again, a good cause, not saying the cause wasn't worth it. I'm just not happy with the management of it.
Well, Councilwoman Cobble, you have definitely got a lot of the questions on the table, and I'm going to have to reserve my concerns because I didn't get a chance to look at this until just a couple of hours ago, and it takes me a little while to digest this. So we'll definitely revisit this, perhaps even in the retreat, because we need to fully understand it. So I appreciate you getting those questions on the table, and it'll help us with additional concerns. The rest of the council, anything else you want to add to this particular item?
I have a question. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Sims, one question, and I think it's one question. I will try to leave it at one question. In your capacity and your involvement with the with our COVID relief grant, you would have been the person, or between you and Ms. Scruggs, you all would be the ones who would be responsible for crafting all of the grant checks. Is that correct? I know it was a separate account, but who managed the the process of processing the checks? Not
No.
who signed, just who created those.
Well, yes and no. Because I think what you're trying to get to is the actual distribution of the money. And so that wasn't in-house. So my role in this was to give money to municipal resource partners, and they actually distributed the money.
So when you say the municipal resource partners, anybody who distributed money on behalf or worked with Stonecrest in a working relationship with the grant funds, you gave the funds to them.
So I gave the money, well, I guess two entities I gave the money to. I gave the money to New Birth, and to Municipal Resource Partners. Those are the only two entities that I gave money to.
Okay, Municipal Resource Partners Organization. Okay, thank you. Okay, and so, okay, all right.
Right.
Yeah.
Satisfied? Council, anyone else on council?
I'll address mine at our budget.
Yes.
I'll address mine at the budget meeting because a lot of issues were brought up in reference to what Councilwoman just spoke about. So I'll just wait till that time.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. If there are no more questions on that, we're going to move on to the next item. And that is finally, we're looking at bringing the purchasing policy up to date with some adjustments that we had talked about before. And Councilwoman Koppel had somewhat taken the lead on that end.
Yes, sir. Mr. Bell, would you give me presentation rights?
Sure. You should have them.
Let's see.
Let me know if you don't. I'll try to make an adjustment, but I think you do.
It looks like I do. Let's see.
Okay.
Here we go. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. So actually, Danielle from Fincher, Denmark, sent us a revision to the purchasing policy in January of last year. And we had a few failed attempts at getting back to this and getting it on the agenda. But seeing as, you know, purchasing has been a provocative topic of discussion as of late, I went ahead and pulled it back out, went through it and took a deeper dive into some areas. So I just wanted to walk through just the changes that I've made, or I'm not gonna say changes, edits that I'm recommending. And then to make it easier, I will definitely send it back out to everyone. I'm sure your email from a year ago was probably somewhere buried if your email looks anything like mine. So I'll send it out so it's on the top of your email list. So I'm not going to go through all the changes that Danielle made. We do have, she wonderfully started with the track changes. So you'll see her track changes on here. So I'm just going to skip right to some of the areas where I made took a deeper dive or that I had some questions about. So I'll start here first under the scope. Under this section, it talks about what does not apply. So the provisions of this policy do not apply to the procurements of the following. So one was, this one I just needed it, and maybe we can at a later date either talk with her or Winston, if you have anything to add in some of these areas, feel free. But this is one I just needed some more explanation about. Works of art for public places or other creative artistic endeavors that require particular or demonstrated skill or talent. So I just wanted to know a little bit more kind of about where that came from and what maybe some real life examples of why these kind of purchases would be precluded from following the purchasing policy.
Well, they're unique. It's a very popular exception. And hypothetically, if you could convince Picasso to paint something for you, well, you really don't want to bid that because he's unique and that's the guy you want. And that generally procurement is multiple people can provide the same service. So let's give everybody a fair shot at getting it. But if something is truly unique, like a work of art, one of a kind, and you want this particular artist to do it for you, I mean, that's not something you're going to bid. You're going to get the guy you want. And that's an exception to procurements that is present in most procurement policies.
Okay. And so help me a little bit more about on the back end of this. It says, but not to include artists, but not limited to, rather. artists, musicians, and writers. So I guess I definitely understand what you're saying now about works of art. Help me understand the back end of that. So if we were trying to bring an artist in or a musician or a writer for some, I'm not going to use the word event, but I don't know, some program or something, that would be excluded from that as well. I mean, we could just kind of contract with any old artist to show up and
Right.
put on a concert.
Sure. If you wanted to put out a concert and you wanted to try to get a musician, and if you can get TI, well, you're not going to bid. I mean, if you can get tip, you're going to get tip. I mean, that's just that. I mean, and so it's you can artists, yes, musicians. That whole field is just different, and it not limited to. Yeah, it might be a sculptor, which isn't there. So I mean, so we don't want to have an exhaustive list, but artists, writers, painters, sculptors, musicians, it's generally seen as not an apples to apples comparison, which lends itself to bidding. If someone says, I could, do the drywall in your new city hall, well, that's not a unique skill or service. You can get a 1,000 different people who can do that. So cost is going to be an issue. You bid that out. But if you're going to have a concert and you want a world-class musician, and you get somebody who's world renowned, well, yeah, you won't have to bid that out, even if you're going to pay them $1 million, because that person is unique in what they do, and that just doesn't really lend itself to a bidding type process. You're not going to take the lowest bidder to do your concert. You're going to find, a world renowned artist that you want to pay to perform.
Now, does that preclude does that preclude us from following what's set in the budget?
Well, no, the budget is the budget, but what I'm saying though is just from a public bidding process where everybody can bid, and you're going to evaluate them based on some established criteria, and you're going to take fundamentally the lowest bidder. That's not something that you do with the arts. That's okay. Construction and roads and computers and police cars and things like that.
Okay, and so D would probably fall into that same category.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, but it does not. So I'm fine with it. Is not now what the understanding that doesn't mean it doesn't have to be budgeted for. So it may not have to follow this specific bid requirements, but it most certainly does not preclude it from following what's in the budget.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Cool beans. All right, so then I'll just skip right over D because it pretty much means the same thing as C. Here, I took out entertainment from here only because and this is just a personal procurement preference, but I think this is a very broad word to define. So, and maybe Winston, maybe you can tie this back here to C and D. And maybe that's what that is supposed to be referencing. But I just felt like entertainment is really broad.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the others. I mean, you could certainly take it out, and I mean, it's kind of, I guess, if you were going to have I don't know why you would, but so at a retreat, you may have a comedian between sessions, and I mean, just to kind of keep the crowd alive. Something like that, entertainment, but I see, Councilwoman, where in that particular instance, with conferences and so on and so forth, it might be a little bit unclear. So maybe you would want to refine it, or just take it out altogether, or somehow link it to C and D and say we don't need it there because it's covered elsewhere. But I see your concern.
Okay. All right. Well, again, I mean, these are just my recommendations, so we'll be able to get some feedback, back and forth. But you hit it on the nail. Unless we were going to connect it directly to C or D, or connect it directly to entertainment at a conference, it seemed like you could use that in many different ways, and say it didn't have to follow the purchasing policy. So here I just, yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I did have something to add to that whenever you get a second.
Yeah, no, go right ahead as long as Mayor Pro Tem doesn't mind. I can't
yeah.
see you all.
Go ahead.
I can't see you talking.
Work session, we're open.
Okay. Well, all I was going to say is that when I went to one of my conferences, they did like a networking thing, and Jacobs, you know, of course they paid for it because it's part of my training. But, you know, when we start bringing staff on and they go to these conferences, one of the networking items that we had was going to their local art exhibit, kind of like their, I can't find the word for it right now, but their local theater. And so we purchased tickets to go to their theater, which did support their local economy and things like that. So I can see the entertainment portion of that. I guess that's where that was put in. That's what I was just basically saying. That's where that was put in. I think that's why they put that in there like that.
Yeah, and so I agree with you. I've been to a few different conferences where there are, you know, different means of entertainment in between, you know, dinner and the last session of the day, or just something as a, you know, membership appreciation. And obviously Jacobs can do all that they want to do because they're not a public entity. But I just felt like because we are a public entity, that it could cause some challenge for us to really be able to simplify what that means. I mean, even in my career, I host an annual training, and I've tried to think of every way that I could provide some entertainment and take the cost and add it to my budget. And there's just no way, you know, at least in state law, that it's allowed. I couldn't do it. If I did it, I had to do it out of my pocket, or have, you know, somebody donate their time if I wanted to bring in a comedian or a magician. And actually that's what I wound up doing, is just paying for it out of my pocket, because I really wanted the conference to have some kind of, you know, something that was a little relieving to the attendees, but I could not do it with my state budget. So I understand what it's for. It made me a little uneasy about that specifically as that broad in a public entity.
Right. So what I was saying is maybe if you broke it out and maybe did it a subsection, the entertainment had to be, you know, either to another local government entity or something like that. Maybe that would be able to cover that, so that if we are sent, we are able to, you know, after traveling and going to conferences back to back and things like that, that you would be able to relax and enjoy and network with your peers, because networking in government is key to, you know, a lot of day-to-day activities that we have.
Yep. Okay. Well, I'm gonna make a note to see if we can get legal to figure out a way, if there is a way to help with that a little bit.
Sounds good.
Nope, can't spell. Okay. All right. The only other thing I added here was just membership dues and stuff that's established during the budget process. And Q is something I wanted to talk through a little bit more as well with legal. Grant awards and agreements that require certain firms or individuals to perform the work. So I was hoping somebody could maybe give me an example of a real life example of that.
There are some like grants you can get for remediating brownstones or things like that. And sometimes there are outside groups that are more familiar with like someone like the collaborative group that's familiar with land use and zoning and things like that could help prepare the report for a grant like that.
And that would be something that we could not sole source?
I think sometimes, I think it probably depends on the grant, what the grant is, and the specific people that can provide it.
Okay. Is this something that just commonly seen in most policies, or this wasn't one that was in the prior version? So I was just curious on, talking through that one a little bit more.
I would have to get with Danielle on that one in particular, and what her thought process was there.
Okay. I'll go back and add a note there. Okay, so finance director, we made an update to by home rule to the charter. So the city accountant, the finance director replaced the city accountant. So I just made that change so that it doesn't reflect what was in the prior charter. In this definition is the same. The only thing I added was to reference where more detail is in emergency procurement, which is defined in a later section. What I added here is to, with regulatory requirements, to include declared emergencies of the state or federal government. It's probably implied when you read the paragraph, but I just wanted to pull it out and make it clear. This is another one that's probably just a personal preference, but I couldn't think of many cases where we would designate someone else to have the authority that the mayor and council have, especially in procurement and purchasing and finance. And so, I mean, it's really just legalese. It could stay, it could go, but I couldn't think of any way that we would designate our authority as mayor and council.
Councilwoman, I want to say again, and that is that by no means do we want to cut anyone short of what they want to lay before this work session. We're on page, 12 now of 51?
Yeah, I don't have something on every page, I promise.
Oh, okay, all right. Thank you.
The only thing here is it referenced a contract, but did not reference the purchase of land in the conflict of interest area. So I just wanted to add that so that it was clearly understood that if you had a substantial interest in a contract, which included the purchase of land or real estate, so not just services and goods, but also real estate and land. This one we'll probably want to talk through with each other, but the appointment or who the purchasing agent is rather. So it designated the city manager, but I thought that in much discussion that we've had, the city manager may or may not be whom the council would want to appoint as the purchasing agent. I think it could very well be a number of different people. It could be a city manager, it could be a finance director. My preference is to be actually the procurement officer would be the purchasing agent. So just in my recommendations, I just made it where the city council would appoint a purchasing agent for the city. Did not define it specifically as a city manager. And then that person would serve under the direction of the city manager in accordance with the policy. But should the council actually appoint the city manager as the purchasing agent, then he or she would serve under the direction of the city council. So not to serve under the direction of his or herself. But if it did come down to the city manager being the purchasing agent, that they would not report to themselves, that they would, or not report, but their direction wouldn't be to themselves, it would be to the city council. So I'm sure there'll be a little bit of conversation back and forth about that, but I wanted to get away from designating who this person is, and decide if we want it to be the city manager, that's fine. If we want it to be finance director, procurement officer, that it could be whomever was appointed, not necessarily written to be one specific role. The only thing I added here was lease agreements. So the responsibility would be for, procuring goods, capital assets, real estate. But it did not mention lease agreements or leases, service agreements or leases. So I just added that. So I just added here at the bottom of this, subject to the proper approval as defined throughout the policy. So the purchasing agent will be responsible for negotiating and arranging the contracts. And obviously that's just subject to whatever the approval is that's outlined throughout the policy. So just some wordsmithing or legalese, I guess. Same thing here. It's just that if the finance director was to be appointed as the purchasing agent, they would not send monthly reports to themselves. So I just added here that they would send that report to the city manager versus sending it to themselves if they were to be appointed the purchasing agent. So it just clears up where you're not sending things to yourself. Same thing here. Just making it so that if you are the finance director and the purchasing agent, that you're sending your things to someone else. It just continues to keep some checks and balances and separation of duty. This was in the previous policy and I did not see it in this policy. So I added it back, and if it needs to come out, it can, but I wanted to make sure that we mentioned the procurement of leasing or long-term financing or advance payments or deposits were approved by the city council before they were executed. I tried to find where that may have been captured in another place. I didn't see it, but by all means, if somebody else sees it, we can remove it from there. I increased the time here to 4 to 8 hours. Sometimes it's a little difficult for a department head or purchasing officer to be notified in one day that a good has been delivered. So I just put it for 2 days, just to give a little more practicality in the amount of time. We had some discussion earlier this year about contract amendment and extension and with SPLOST, and we referenced this section specifically about the amount of the contract not being a substantial difference from the original in order for the amendment to take place. But we wanted to make sure that the council was made aware of that before we decided to amend it, even though it may not substantially change, or the contract amount is not substantially different. The council may want to decide if that contract needs to be amended or not. Even though it's not a necessity to rebid, we still should have some reference so we know what the intent is and can provide some clarification or ask for clarification for why it's being amended. So not really having much to do with rebidding, more so to do with, is that something that we want to do in general? So I just added, well, with approval from city council. These two, again, were in the last policy, and I did not see them translated here back into this policy. So if they're somewhere else, we can definitely take them out. So that's all that really was. I added here, so Danielle, I think, did a great job delineating in a much easier way, a much better, easier way to read it, and very much so easier to comprehend, in my opinion, on the purchasing thresholds. So one thing I did make a change to, though, is that anything that's 10,000 or over, to be honest, it's 10,000 to 24. But if you'll see, the city council is both, is my recommendation is included in both the 10,000 threshold and anything above 25. So really anything over 10,000 would require, before it's all said and done, the approval of city council. And so you'll see it obviously already there for 25. I'm sure that will spark much debate, but that was my recommendation. So the only thing I did here was include that in words down here so it matched the matrix above it. We're almost at the end, Mayor Pro Tem, I promise. Just did some wordsmithing here. We use city council throughout the policy, and only in this section did it change to governing authority. So all I did was change governing authority to city council. Again, if there's a legal reason why it needs to stay governing authority, by all means, I was just going for some consistency in context. But that's all the changes that were there. And same thing here, just made it consistent. I will point out though that one of the, and actually Danielle kind of read my mind here, but the biggest changes to these sections are that a sole source procurement would only be valid with the authorization of city council, and single source would be the same, only authorized with approval by city council. So I only made a grammatical change, but I would have recommended that same change in that the single source and sole source has to be approved by city council. There is much more meat in this section. You might want to definitely make sure you read the emergency procurement. It definitely dives into more of a definition of what emergency is. And again, Danielle did a great job there, giving that definition some clarity and some meat to it. What I did was just add that during normal business hours, if the city manager is unavailable, that the user would go to the city council in the absence of the city manager. Here I changed this from 25 to 10. And that's simply because I recommended that change above in the matrix, that city council would need approval for anything 10,000 or over. So I just made that consistent with the change in that matrix. The biggest change I made here, so now this section is talking about land acquisition. The biggest recommendation I made in this section was Danielle made the change that a staff member may work with a real estate broker. What I've added is that real estate broker must though be approved by city council prior to the staff beginning that work. So it just makes it so that the city council knows who the staff member is working with when having real estate negotiations and conversations. And so that there aren't secondary and third parties or fourth parties as real estate brokers added to the same conversation. It just keeps it contained so we know who's having those conversations and we're not surprised when we see real estate paperwork that other brokers have been added without prior knowledge from the council. This was missing from this update, and it was in the past one that we will publish the executed sales contracts and leases. And there may have been a legal reason why that was taken out. If so, obviously no issue. But if not, I thought it was prudent to have that here, that they will be published. Okay, so I'm sorry, an appendix to the purchasing policy is the purchasing card policy. I'll note here that I'd like to see us really build out the purchasing card policy more, but for the purposes of what's been done here, I did make some recommendations. Something not too detailed, but I wanted to make sure there was some mandatory training completed before purchasing card is issued. It shouldn't take very long in this phase because the policy is just a few pages. The purchasing card policy is just a few pages, but in the future, hopefully we'll have more robust of a policy, which the training would be much more substantial. Here, it wouldn't be long, but at least it guarantees that there is some training before the card is issued. Two big changes in this section here that we'll probably want to talk through is the purchasing restrictions. So food, fuel, and non-alcoholic beverages. Alcoholic beverages is already included. That's why non-alcoholic is there. But this is what's prohibited from being used on the purchasing card. These two things align more with the state policy for purchasing cards. So food and fuel and any kind of beverage, alcoholic or non, is prohibited. And not to say that it's prohibited from the card. So it's not to say that that's not expense that's reasonable for carrying out your duties, especially if you're on travel. But it's just a prohibited expense on the card. So you still may be reimbursed for food, reimbursed for fuel. It's just something that you won't be able to put on the purchasing card itself. And typically you do that because it's hard to tell, especially for fuel, where your your city miles begin and your city miles end and your personal miles begin. So when you fuel and you fill your tank up with gas, there's no way to show that all of that gas went to city business, right? Because again, you can't tell where your city miles end and your personal miles begin. So it's something that we prohibit, at least on the state side, because you can't make that differential between personal and business, and kind of the same with food. So if you're being reimbursed for food, then you can show a receipt to say this is what I had for lunch, and I was obviously at this meeting, because you've already paid for the registration for that, so I was at that meeting, and here is the lunch receipt. We can get even down to more detail, and you can go per diem, whatever the case may be. I recommended that it's just prohibited use on a card, not that it can't be reimbursed again, but it's just prohibited on a card. So made that adjustment. So I took it from being a use that is from a use that is allowable to a use that is prohibited. So I took it from here under the allowable section, moved it to the prohibited section. But then just made a delineation here: purchase of lodging or education or training materials while on city business, but outside of the city or county limits. I figured we probably have a little bit of discussion there about what's outside of the county limits, but in a sense, it's just to cover, you obviously can't use your purchasing card to get a hotel room in Stonecrest, or for that matter, even in Dekalb County, just because we all obviously live, within the city, or, remotely close somewhere in the county. So it just didn't make sense to me to allow us to put that expense on a purchasing card when you're inside the city limits. And then again, we can talk about if county limits has taken it too far or not, or if you want to expand it and say the metro area. But I just figured we would have some conversation. And I promise you, Mayor Pro Tem, I'm wrapping up. This again just made it that this section talks about who the administrator of the card is. The administrator would be the purchasing agent, whomever we designated in the above policy for purchasing will be the purchasing agent. And to align with the mandatory training, it would be mandatory for this purchasing agent to administer the training. So I just added mandatory in front of instruction. In our current purchasing card policy, the date that a report should be sent in was blank. So Danielle recommended 10 days. I extended that to 15. Just something standard that we use at the state. So I just gave it a little more cushion to be able to get that report in, especially if there's a lot of, and this may be in the future, if there's a lot of purchasing card transactions. The 10th day of the month may be a little too quick. The 15th should give you enough time to let most things on the card settle before you send the report out. So that's it. So again, I'll send this out to everyone. These are just my recommended edits. Danielle's are also here. You'll be able to see her track changes. But I'm hoping that we can have a discussion about it a little bit more and get this approved on the city council agenda so we can get it approved and get it going immediately. So I will stop sharing now.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Cobble. This goes back to a point that we tried to make earlier, and that is the need for committees. I would like to have seen this discussed at length in the Finance Committee or some other committee within the council on the city of Stonecrest to involve more citizens input as well as more council input, so we could vet this thoroughly and not have to spend all of this time in a work session discussing this. But it's necessary information, and we thank you for the time you put into it. And I know that most of you are just getting this like I am. So once we get a chance to go through this again, and I did have some conversation with Councilwoman Koppel about this as we went along, but we did not have a chance to meet as a committee because we were not authorized to do so. But here it is, and this definitely needs to be updated. So please take a look at it and be ready to work on getting it on the agenda for consideration. Anything else to add to the purchasing policy? Then the next thing on the agenda was the 2021 budget retreat. And as I mentioned before, we were trying to come up with a date so we could get staff and council on a virtual retreat to talk about the 2021 budget. I know we were discussing some amendments and adjustments to it before it was approved by default, but I know at any point in time we can come back and adjust the budget for reason. And that is why this is on here, and to get a chance to discuss some of those reasons, we're gonna come up with a date for a retreat, and that should be real soon. So if you haven't already considered it, please consider your calendars and how we can fit this in within the next couple of weeks.
Are we looking at this as an all-day retreat, or how many hours, or is there any kind of timeline or time limit for this?
How many hours can you stand?
Don't ask me that.
3 or 4 hours?
Whatever's necessary. Let me put it that way. Whatever we need to do to get it done.
I know in order to accommodate the working class, we may have to make it an evening. And if you go from 6 to 10, that's a good 4 hours. Is what I was thinking. And if you need to do a second day, we could do a follow-up day.
I'm fine. I just wanted to find out in reference to that so I can look at my calendar and schedule it.
Yes. And I wanted the deputy city manager on board to make sure that staff will be available to give us the support that we need, such that we could come out with some final recommendations based on facts and what's available and what's not available, what can be adjusted and what is going to create some difficulties by adjusting before we make recommendations. So you want to work on those dates now? You want to email them in? How do you want to do it?
Well, I like your suggestion of breaking it up. Maybe do 2 hours one evening, and maybe the next week 2 hours another evening. One, so we're not taking up all of staff's evening. Especially saying as we already have 2 standing meetings. But then also so we can save Councilman Turner not to go for 4 hours. You know, I can go 4, 6, 10 as long as we're talking about budget.
Really?
So don't use me. But I do like the idea of breaking it up and being able to, you know, do a couple hours one day and a couple hours another day.
And between the 2 working class types,
Yes,
if you can do it during the staff working hours, if you can fit that in, let us know.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes, ma'am.
are we considering a weekend at all?
A weekend. I can do a weekend. I'm just speaking for one.
Because for the
I can
working
do weekend. Staff might not
for the working
want
class,
to do a weekend.
that would be my preference to, even if we had to do all day on a Saturday and half day on Sunday, I would be probably more inclined and probably a little bit more receptive to those dates than to have to do 8 hours in front of a computer and then come back and do 4 or 5 more in front of a computer.
Well, let's check with the deputy city manager and see if staff is going to be available for any weekend time or how much weekend time, whatever it takes to make this process work. So I'm glad to know we have that flexibility.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then I will commit to work with the deputy city manager this week and try to come up with a date, a suggested date by the end of this week. Does that work?
If I may, Councilman, Mayor Pro Tem, there was a date mentioned by Deputy City Manager of February 8th, and it's a Monday. And I know if you all were talking about breaking it up into 2 separate days, maybe you want to check and see if maybe do like a Monday, Wednesday, or a Monday, Tuesday. Because if we do 2 Mondays back to back, that's not going to work because of council meetings and work sessions.
Okay, well, it doesn't have to be 2 Mondays. It could be another day of the week. Okay, well, we'll take that into consideration.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on that? Suggestions? Okay, then the next thing is the status update of the URA, the COVID program and the procurement RFP, PCAR. I know we've talked about some of it, but Travis, back to the URA reports. And I know we're getting other reports. Maybe it's going to be included as a part of the other monthly reports. But I put that on there in particular concern about the payments we're making for SAMs and for Sears. And based on the report you sent, I have a better understanding now that it's an annual payment. And I'm pretty much satisfied if you want to send that same information monthly, okay. But from the way you explained it, if I understood it correctly, it's a single payment annual. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's a single annual payment, February of every year.
Okay.
So our first payment is coming up.
Okay. And other financial reports that we're going to get?
So I thought there is a financial, well, there is a package of reports as a whole that I believe goes out to the mayor and council, was my understanding. My reports are in that package.
Okay, then your package was initially sent to who?
To Alejandro, who's code enforcement. I guess he put some all together.
If I can intervene, all of us are required to send in our statistics to Alejandro Farrell, the code enforcement director.
Yeah, I'm here.
You and Pledge Joyner, our deputy city manager, combine all that into a staff report, which we will be discussing tonight. I believe it's the last item, the departmental briefing review from each select department, and you all received that in Pledge, I believe, sent it last week.
Yeah, it was Thursday, I believe.
Right, but as far as the URA monthly reporting, I think, well, Travis and I were discussing that, and since there's only activity once a year, it's kind of hard to do a monthly report if there's only activity in it once a year.
I understand the URA, but there are other activities going on, and we used to get a monthly report from the city manager.
Yes, Councilman Turner, I believe that was, as Megan stated, that's the report that is now called the City Hall report, I believe, that Mr. Dorner sent out to everyone, I think on Thursday or early Friday morning.
Perhaps I missed it. Maybe I'm the only one who missed it.
I don't recall that. Is that a Jacobs report? Is that
No,
that something required?
That is something that over the last 2 months, myself and Mr. Joyner, since you all have asked for some kind of monthly report, we were coming up, working with all the department heads, as Megan stated, on getting their information that is pertinent to them. And so we've come up with a format, and he just sent the report out. Like I said, I believe it was either late Thursday or Friday morning. And I was included.
I see one in November.
Yeah, so it should have been.
I'm sorry, it is in December. I'm sorry. It's a
the
November report.
I believe that is correct.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
So
All right, then I know who to ask. I said, okay, that's why we have this.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the
So-
November report, and the goal is to send you all the report at the first work session of each month. And since we
Yeah.
just finished November, we sent that one in, but hopefully we'll have December and January's for your next work session.
Yeah, so what we're looking at, everyone's turning all their data in for December, since we technically just closed December, on the 31st, about a week and a half or so ago. So it's due to me like by the end of this week. I'll have it compiled and give it to the city manager's office or deputy city manager probably next week. And then he, shortly thereafter, he will send it out, after he reviews it. So you should have it probably within the next week and a half or so.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
COVID program. Now, the COVID program has a committee, and that committee has not been reconstituted. That City Council has approved, but still they're functioning. And considering how critical it is, we'd like to know where we stand with the COVID program in terms of the disbursements and the accountability of the funds. Mr. Boone, is that you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. We have the program for the COVID-19 Small Business Relief Program was technically through from March of 2020 through the end of the year, December 31st, 2020. Obviously, that was the protocol associated with the allocation of funds through the federal government. We received our funds, as previously stated, the end of October, the beginning of November, with the intent that it had to be dispersed by the end of the year. So we had about a month and a half to be able to receive applications, to be able to vet applications, to be able to determine grants, and to be able to disperse payments to the applicants. As you'll know, or maybe you may not know, a lot of municipalities established a program that was loan related, with a small portion of it being grant, the majority of it being a loan program. We chose through our committee to be able to determine that as our small businesses and our businesses in general were affected by the stress and anxiety of having a program that was where their business was not performing as well as it had been in years past, that we wanted to be a grant program. We closed the applications on Friday. I believe Friday was December 18th was a Friday. We closed the applications on Friday to be able to review them, to have the remainder of the month to be able to review those applications. And I'm proud to let you know that we delivered and granted all the money out that was allocated to the city, minus some expenses, and looking at that from a standpoint of COVID cares and COVID small business relief and Stonecrest cares. So we have distributed the funds.
Now comes the accountability, and that will be rolled out. When you'll have all of that accounted for.
Yes, sir. We're actually in the process of doing that right now. There are three different components that we've got to take a look at. We've got to look at county accountability statements, state accountability statements, and federal government accountability statements. So we're in the process of reviewing all of that right now and preparing that for a final report.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And let me just say one other thing, and that is that Ms. Settle said something once, and I was a little bit puzzled when she first said it, and that is that funds should be set aside for, what was the expression, for mental health. And in the last few weeks, really the last couple of months, I've had some people to really approach me about how it is impacting them, the stress level, the anxiety level, and some other serious concerns that they have impacted by COVID. And that end of it, Ms. Settle, can you address that somewhat as to how that's been addressed.
Thank you. One of the things that we know from COVID, like you mentioned, Councilman, is that it has been infected tremendously by mental health. So what we did was through our partnerships, through our different benevolent services that are provided through the churches, we were able to have those services available through those churches when we found folks that were calling in stating that they needed certain things. Remember, Stonecrest Cares is a resource. We are a resource where we take the opportunity to forward individuals help based on their specific needs in places where we know that they can find that type of help. So we've been able to do that. I've also had an opportunity to be in contact with another mental health institution here within, well, actually two of them that are in Stonecrest. So we know that as them being partners on the business side for COVID relief, that we also allow the opportunity for people to be referred based on that. So because of different things that are related to HIPAA laws and those kinds of things, we basically left it up to them to provide the information on that level so that they might have them. The impact of the mental health is related to all of these things working together. The financial aspect of it can actually send your mental health into different areas. The physical aspect of it, stress, as we all know, is a huge killer. So what we try to do is we try to work through different organizations where we're talking about how we can deal with stress, how we can deal with the mental aspects of it, because it affects the entire person, the entire body. And then it shows up in the body in all types of ways physically, in terms of people through heart attacks and through other kinds of areas. So we're working very closely with the nonprofits that we're working with to make sure that when we get calls in or people need different sources, that we can provide that. That's why it was so important for people to know that if you had a concern, then address that concern to us so that we can forward the information to the person that could help them in that particular need. And I did some of that today, actually, in terms of referring people who are in that need. For example, you could have someone who because of losing a job might not be able in a position to where they have the health benefits that they could get the medication that even can help them with areas that they might have or health concerns in that area. So this is going to be ongoing for us. It's not going to stop because we close out the case. It's going to be an ongoing type of relationship where we're working with professionals in the areas that we can help people in that area. So does that kind of answer your question?
It does, and you can catalog the ones providing the help, the help, brother, and those who
Sure.
receiving the help through the mental illnesses. I understand the protection of their
Yes.
privacy, but we can track those who have been the agencies to provide it and account for what they've done.
Yes, it's been a great opportunity for us to build very great relationships with people that are right here at home that we wouldn't have known have it not been for the pandemic in terms of providing services. So yes, that is ongoing. And like I told Clarence, I said, we're checking in and every week I go through the different nonprofits that we work with in other agencies to find out, can you give an idea as to how many people you were able to help so that we can kind of track in some kind of way the success of what we're doing and also find areas where we might be lagging.
Thank you. Council?
Yes, I have just a couple of questions. My questions would be directed to Mr. Boone.
Yes, ma'am.
I won't go again on record asking for what I've asked for 5 times. You are aware that I've not received it, but I do want to ask you about this final report where you say you have to do county paperwork, state paperwork, and the federal paperwork. When is that report? When is that report due?
They have not, actually, Councilwoman Grimes, they have not stated a date that it's due for it. But what we're doing is, if you know me, you'll people who know me know that I don't wait till the last minute to get anything done. So I'm in the process of doing it right now. My experience has been that someone may not put a date on it, but then at the end of the month they say, well, you've got a day or two to get it done, and I'd rather have it done that way than wait until the last minute. But to your point about the different agencies and different level, as the grant was funded through the federal government and then dispersed to the 50 states, and then further dispersed to the counties, and then beyond that to the municipalities. That's the reason why we've got to do one for each of those to be able to make sure that that's the case.
Okay.
Hope I answered your question.
Well, you did. You know, there's not a date yet that you've been told, but the date that you're working toward having this completed, I'd like to see that paperwork before.
Absolutely.
Oh, and the municipal resource partners.
Yes.
Who's that person? Because I can't find that information. I know they're out of Valdosta, but I can't find who's the principal agent. Who was the person, I guess, that you were working with here in with our program? Who was that? Who was the head of that?
So as you know, municipal partners was one of the four aspects that we worked with. One was the applications were received by the startup factory. They were vetted by CB Keener LLC. The awards were given through economic development, being able to review all those applications after they were vetted, and then it went to municipal resource partners. Municipal resource partners, I have Mr. Byron King is my contact at the local level. I can get you his contact information and where you can follow up with him.
Thank you. All right, that's my only question. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Anyone else?
I've had a few.
Yes.
So along the same lines as, I guess, the answer you just gave to Councilman Grimes' last question.
Yes.
And something that clearly is probably just me haven't fully been able to comprehend the difference between the small business program and not the difference in the definition of them, but the difference in how we administer the funds, and the I'm just going to call it the Stonecrest Cares side. Even though obviously Stonecrest Cares is a resource, as Iris has mentioned, I still can't quite follow how we administered them individually. So you just walk through the small business side. So yes. I get that. That was the startup factory, and then the Kenner Group, and then you all in economic development, vetting the applications, and then the municipal service provider. So did every church or nonprofit that received grant funds go through a similar process to be awarded those grant funds, or how did we administer that?
I'm glad to answer that question for you.
Okay.
One of the things we did was when we talked to the churches in the area, the nonprofits, we determined if they had a benevolence program, to be able to determine not only did they have one, but what was the degree of the program that they had. So if we wanted to be able to make sure, first of all, that we hit the right resources with it. As we mentioned earlier, if we had tried to develop this program ourselves, we would not have been able to get anywhere close to the success rate that we had. But we checked with the churches and nonprofits to find out whether it be feed the hungry, whether it be clothing, whether it be home, be rent or mortgage assistance, whether it be utility assistance, whether it be any of these services. One of the things we found out during the holiday season was that one of the things that we didn't anticipate, we forgot about, was toys. So we had some things we looked at where we were able to take care of some kids. So what we did is we took a look at the programs, took a look at the depth of their program, and then we tried to support it. One of the things we did was we tried to make at least one major contribution in each district, to a church in each district, to be able to support the citizens in that area. And then once again we took a look at programs. It's odd that because one of the I'll give you an example. There were a couple of churches, very small churches, that didn't have a benevolence program. And over the course of talking to them, I asked them what they saw as a need in the community. And they talked about some families that they knew of that didn't have any, that needed some help in some specific areas. And I asked them what were they doing with, how were they being able to meet the needs once they were identified? And they said that if they, that they didn't have the funds available to be able to do it. And so I offered them some funds based upon what they were able to do. There was such a broad reach within both of those small organizations that now they have they're developing their own benevolence program because of the success that they had to it. So once again, we looked at who had a program, the extent of which the program existed, and then how could we make an impact and be able to support people, especially in every district.
Okay. Do you have that documented somewhere?
Do I have it documented somewhere as far as the scope of their benevolence?
No, your process by which you chose, it sound like almost handpicked the churches and the nonprofits that received funding.
Actually, we didn't handpick them. We actually reached out to the churches and nonprofits, and they responded. There were a lot that didn't respond to our request. Many that did, and we try to support all of those that made a request.
Okay, so, but do you have? So what I'm trying to, I've had many a question from churches and nonprofits over the past few months that have said, how did such and such, I'm not going to call any names, okay, how did such and such church receive funding? Was I supposed to apply? Were we supposed to, what was that process? And so obviously not being able to hand them or email them a document that says, here are the steps that were taken, here are the qualifications, here's how these churches and nonprofits were selected. I'm asking you that, do you have something documented that should that question arise, we can say with all certainty, yes, this is the process that we followed. We asked the nonprofits. Well, obviously, we didn't ask them to apply for anything, but we did a cold call, or so trying to be able to put pen to paper on what was the exact process that we used to determine which church and which nonprofit received those funds.
That's an excellent question, and one that I didn't anticipate at this meeting, but we certainly have notes as to how we developed that part of it. I know Iris is.
I can answer some of that because I was the one making the phone calls. It was old school. I mean, we had a time frame. We had a short period of time. And what we did was we took a list of every single church that we had on record in Stonecrest. And I called them up and I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I mean, not only from the standpoint of, I'm just calling to find out what you're doing. You're this church in this particular area. How are you serving the needs of the citizens that are here? And they would express some of the programs and stuff that they had. I can't tell you how many people, I didn't even realize there were some programs that were out there that churches were doing on their own. And people have to realize that even though churches are nonprofits, they're still a business. So because they were a business, I went through a very extensive vetting situation where I took actually about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks on the phone, just calling. I mean, I come from a sales background, so calling.
Well, that's a good point.
The questions were asked. Tell me about your benevolence. What are you doing? Tell me about your church.
All of that is super fantastic, Iris. I just want to know, do we have that process documented? Where we can,
in terms of the process being documented, I have notes on everybody I talked to. I have notes, and it was the same process. Actually, if you could take the application that the businesses did online, were the same questions I were asking them, because at the end of the day, they're still a business. So we wanted
so to your point though, that and I think that's what I think one of the constituents heard you say that at a meeting or two ago, that maybe more than 2 meetings ago now, but that a church or nonprofit is a business. One and the same. But so the very question that they asked me was, well, why didn't we use the same process for that group if we are considering them to be a business? actually comparing the work that they do into that same category. Why did we choose to vet them in a less formal and public way? Why did we choose a different route?
The reason was actually you were the reason for that. Because one of the things that you brought out that was a very good point was that you felt, remember when you mentioned you felt that it would be best if half of the funds went to helping individuals and the other half went to helping businesses. One of the things that I knew that we, based on the amount of funds that we had, we couldn't help everybody. But what we could do was leverage. So when you're dealing with nonprofit, you have one is more profitable base when you're looking at businesses, and the other is more benevolent based or based on providing the needs for people. So that's what we were looking at. How's the best way that we could leverage? And I use that word all the time because that's what we were doing. We were able to get more mileage out of what we were able to give to nonprofits that we ever could have gotten given to for-profits. So that's what we were using. But we wanted to make sure that people, that the churches themselves were good stewards of the funds. And so that's why I worked with a number of people today, just checking back to find out how they're being good stewards of what they were given based on the services that they have provided in the past, just like any other business. So that's the difference, was the leverage and the impact that we could have gone further with utilizing the churches as opposed to utilizing more businesses. And actually, you were the one that spurred that idea for us.
Yeah, no, I obviously definitely remember wanting us to equalize more what we were given to our constituents and what we were given to the small businesses. I did not, I'll be honest with you, I did not envision it being administered the way that you did it. Not saying that it was wrong or bad. I did not envision that. I did envision a more formal process where there was some paperwork and some paper trail and a little bit something a little bit more tangible for us to be able to document, outline, trace, and track. But your last comment led me to my second question, which was twofold. One, is there a requirement in the CARES Act fund that the recipients of the award, rather they are small business or nonprofit, are they required to report out an official report how they've used those funds and related to COVID relief?
That's a Clarence question, but one of the things, like I said, we were doing anyway, was making sure that we followed up to find out how they were using, because the main concern on the Stonecrest Care side were how are the needs met for the citizens of Stonecrest. So that's a question maybe Clarence can answer or would know, is that in fact a requirement? I thought it was not a requirement, but you can find out. Clarence, is that a requirement?
It's not a requirement.
Okay. So my last question is, I had some very unpleasant conversations with some folks over maybe 2-3 weeks time frame about some either follow-up calls they received after receiving the awards or directions they were given in how to specifically use those funds, which is why I asked, was the report required for them to prove that they use those funds for actual COVID relief? Because some of those conversations that were brought to me were not ones that made me very happy. And I'm not going to disclose what those conversations were right now, right here, but I will tell you that folks were telling me that they were given directions on how to spend those funds that were not related to COVID relief, that were more so related to construction, repair, well, not related to COVID relief for the constituent. Let me say that. Surely maybe COVID relief could aid those nonprofits or those churches in being able to do some things that they weren't able to do because, the parishioners were not being able to bring offering and things like that. So certain funds, were short. But I did receive, a substantial amount of calls inquiring about what were the rules and regulations for how the nonprofit or the church is to spend those funds, because they were receiving follow-up calls with specific instructions on how to use those funds that were not related to the constituent. So I'm glad to hear you say that you're following up. I wish we had a more formal process to do that by, so that some of what I've been told, we could really, put to rest that it is or is not happening. But I hope, I'm just gonna say that I hope that those conversations that were brought to me were exaggerated, and that they were not, the full truth, because we obviously, to your point, Iris, the intent was to make sure that those funds went to things like the benevolence programs, where we can most certainly secure that residents were able to get, whether it was mental health assistance or rental assistance or utility assistance, or even being able to buy food for their families or clothing for their children. That's how those nonprofits and churches were spending those funds, not that they were spending them on construction and repair and maintenance, and not to say that we could not have found another way to help the churches and nonprofits with those things. But when I did bring that point up to you, that I wanted to see us split that 50-50 for constituent services, in my mind, right or wrong, that did not include the churches and nonprofits using that money in ways that did not directly assist the needs of the constituent. And there may not be much we can do about that now, but that's kind of where my hopes led, that we had a more formal program built around the nonprofits and the churches, just like we spent so much time and energy on a formal program with the small businesses. And it was a little disheartening to hear those stories and receive those calls.
Well,
but like I said,
as being
nothing
the
we can do
person,
about it
as
now.
being
But
the person who was making those phone calls, following up with people this week and last, I can't imagine who they would have been talking to from that standpoint. And again, even from the small business side, those funds were left for them to utilize for COVID relief that they had. That the funds are actually for businesses. It was the Small Business COVID Relief Fund. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is figure out, again, how we could leverage, okay, how we could leverage. So I don't have a staff that would allow me to micromanage as I would have liked to have known, but all we did is have an agreement with them that they would be great stewards of these funds. And I think, and that's true whether it's for profit or nonprofit, that we have to rely on people to be good stewards. But the one thing that I want you to understand is that because of this, we have built extremely great relationships as we move forward. And education, again, like I keep saying, it's a big piece of people understanding how to do something. This is a new thing for us. And so our intent was always to fall within the guidelines, and we've done an incredible job, and Clarence has done an incredible job making sure that we fall within those guidelines so that we could provide. But the funds weren't a resident relief, it was business relief. So we did the best that we could in terms of providing services through those nonprofits, because they did make a huge difference. Some people would have been outdoors and in the street if it wasn't for the help that a number of those churches and nonprofits have done, and we are eternally grateful for that.
Okay, we have a lot that we can follow up on now. So what you presented has been, I think, very helpful and a lot of good information. And we'll definitely be able to follow up on a lot of the things that have been put on the table. So I thank you so much. Unless there are other questions from council. Councilman Clanton, we haven't heard from you in a while. You still there?
Absolutely, I'm still here.
All right. Have to check occasionally. Okay.
I appreciate that.
All right. Any other questions from the COVID relief? report.
Yeah, one more question, and this will be my last one. This is to you, Mr. Boone.
Yes.
I have written down in my Stonecrest notebook, 1.7 for admin, 1.5 for Stonecrest Cares, and 3 for the business. Did that change?
I'm sorry, repeat that again, please.
1.7 for admin, 1.5 for Stonecrest Cares, and 3 for the business. Did that division change with the 6.2 that we received?
To be honest with you, I don't have those numbers in front of me right now, so I can't answer that question.
Okay. They were called out at a meeting, and I just had it written down, and I just went back to it just to make sure. But thank you.
Yeah. I'm just not sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. The next item in that category will be the procurement of an audit service for the P cards. Ms. Scruggs, is that you?
I'm not sure if she's
I see the name there.
or if Travis does, but I've been updated on it as well.
It should be Travis.
Yeah.
No, actually, since I had initially reached out to some of the companies and had conversations with them, I removed myself from the process. And so Ms. Scruggs is leading that.
Hi, this is Sonia. I'm on the committee with Gia as well, and we will be meeting on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. to go over the proposals.
Are you saying that you have some proposals already in?
Yes, we do. We actually have 11.
I'm sorry?
Yes, we do.
You said you have how many?
I believe there's 11.
11.
Mhm.
Okay.
Has the solicitation closed?
Yes, it has.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So I know Sonia was getting some feedback. So just to make sure everybody understands, there were 11 bids that we received. It closed December the 31st. I just got a message from Gia that she can't seem to unmute her microphone. So that's why she's not responding. But, and so I believe they're gonna do the bid selection on Wednesday. There's a committee for that will evaluate all of the bids and grade them. And they'll be doing that on Wednesday.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions, Council?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes,
Council, but I was just going to add to that they will have a recommendation at the next work session for you all to decide in February's council meeting to get that audit going in March.
I was under the impression they would bring us 3 recommendations.
I'm sure that's the case, but that was the timeline that I was given.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
I had a question.
Sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, sir.
I'm on that committee for the selection. Are we supposed to return the 3 highest scores? Because this is an RFP we're grading objectively. And so normally when I've been involved with them, we recommend just the highest score. Are you saying that you want the 3 highest scores so then that the council can review again and then make a final determination or selection?
That was my understanding, Council, that you have a different understanding.
No, I didn't have a different understanding. That should be what we receive are the 3 highest scores.
Okay, just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Next item is Jacob's contract. And I understand that it's not necessarily a contract, but we want to hear from Jacob right now in terms of their proposal as to our agreement or the agreement with the city. Mr. Wright, I believe I saw you on the line.
Yes, sir, Mr. Turner. I'm here.
Go ahead.
We corresponded with the mayor and council a few weeks ago about rollover of our contract at the end of the city's fiscal year. If there are no changes to the scope, no amendments to it, the contract provides that it rolls over with a escalation that's calculated in the contract. And so that was the gist of the letter, was conveying that the contract is rolling over and conveying the calculation and bringing you up to speed on some of the things that we normally, there's a contract amendment, changes in staffing and that sort of thing that have occurred during the year. That was the purpose of the letter, and I'd be glad to answer any questions about it if anyone has any.
Council?
I have a question. I don't know. I don't know that I want to ask you, Wayne, only because, it just takes me back to the same old issue I always bring up. But
go ahead, Ms. Cobble. We can talk.
I want to ask you. I want to ask Winston without being on this public call.
Well, that's fine too.
But the portion of the contract, and I don't have the words in front of me, but there is a portion of the contract that includes what's it called? An employee. I should have pulled it up, but it allows a certain percentage of the contract to increase. That's just standard related to. I don't want to say it's cost of living because that's not the way you wrote it in the contract.
It's escalation. I think that's determined in the contract, right?
Right. It's a predetermined amount that's already in the contract, right?
It's based on the consumer price index and the ECI and a percentage of those. It's calculation.
So that's the only thing that we are contemplating in this contract called rollover. I guess I won't call it renewal, but rollover is the only calculation difference that you're presenting to us, right?
Correct.
So maybe now this is for Council and Travis a little bit. So Wayne, close your ears. When
I can mute my speaker, but
when we were going through the budget, there were some increases, 5% here, certain percent in each line that we had a robust discussion about that being significantly different than this built-in, 2% in the contract. And so there was additional increases in that, right? And we talked about, what was the need for that? The contractor hadn't asked for it yet. Where did that come from? It's more than the 2%. And we were given some explanation, and I'm not going to say that it was one that I understood in its entirety, but there was some conversation about why the need for that 5% was put in there, and we questioned kind of that back and forth. But now that we do have the letter from Jacobs, and it is not asking for any other additional increase other than this 2% that's automatically built in. Before, I guess, I don't know if we have to do it before or after, or all together. Obviously, the budget needs to be an amendment made. Should we agree to this amendment with Jacobs, which I don't foresee that we won't for right now. So we would definitely need to go back and make the adjustment to the budget, saying that they have not proposed any other increases for services that they are currently providing, nor have they asked for any additional services to be added to the contract, nor are they taking away any.
Anyone else? Other comments or questions?
So I think she was asking a question.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, Travis.
And Travis, go ahead with the answer.
So I'll try to explain this. I've never amended a budget down. So we'll start there. So I think what we were trying to explain during the budgeting process was we increased everything 5% because we felt like that would cover the cost of the increase, whatever it would be. And so, without knowing exactly what it was going to be at the time. And so that's what we did. Now, as far as the individual departments, I think what I've learned since the budgeting process has taken place is that as far as the individual departments, the money that was budgeted there, those numbers are based on some calculation that the previous city manager came up with that allocated amounts across the budget. I don't know what he used to calculate those numbers or how he came up with that. So that kind of is what it is departmentally. So I think budget wise right now, with this increase, we should be covered.
Well, Travis, we probably need to go back and look at that because if I'm not mistaken, that 5% was specifically added to the contractual services line. So not in a separate line in the budget for that department for operational expenses or departmental expenses, and I could be wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, the 5% was in the contractual services line. So if that is the case, then we would most certainly need to make sure that the contractual services lines don't exceed the amount that we are contracting for those services. If I'm wrong and that 5% is spread between all the lines below contractual services for each department, then you're right. We could be fine. No need to make any adjustments. But if that 5% is specifically built into the contractual services line, I would think that we would not be aligned with what the total cost of the contract is.
No, so it is in the contractual services line. And that's, I think, because as far as I know, we don't receive a breakout of what's employee services versus what's
right. It's lump sum
and all of that. So that's why everything is in the contractual services line. So I guess you're saying you have a problem with the amount in the contractual services line potentially being more than
what the contract total is, right? Right.
Okay.
If you took, and it's probably not as easy as I'm about to explain it. I'm sure it's more complex in the formula, but if you were to add all the contractual services lines, and again, hypothetically, if you were to add all the contractual services line in the budget, that should theoretically total what the lump sum contract is for Jacobs. If it is 5% higher than that, then we are not aligned with what the contract is. Now, granted, can you leave it there and just not spend it? And then at the end of the year, you reconcile and all is well? Sure. But if we know we're gonna do it a budget amendment anyway. So why not make sure that the contractual services line does not exceed or does not still reflect a 5% increase?
Is this something that we can cover at the retreat?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, okay.
I'm conceding that we can fix it.
It's definitely a controllable
Albany
cost.
State grad.
It's definitely a controllable cost that you know what it is. So you can amend the budget to that.
Right.
It'll be easy.
Okay. Did I see any timelines on these, what you were proposing? In terms of when things have to be done? I know this is
Mr. The contract automatically rolls over with this escalation, so there's not a timeline or a need for approval unless there's a concern that the council wants to amend the contract and do something differently.
Okay.
If we want to continue as we are for today, there is no action needed by the council.
All right. Okay, we'll discuss it more at the retreat. Anything else, council? Okay, thank you, Wayne.
You bet. Good to see you, folks.
All right. The next item is CID. A lot of people are asking, what is that all about? A lot of cities have CIDs and they serve a very, very important purpose in terms of having businesses to support auxiliary efforts within the city in terms of security, collecting taxes for road maintenance, cleaning, and a number of things. DeKalb County has, well, one of the biggest CIDs in DeKalb County is in Dunwoody. And that CID has been repeated, copied in some other jurisdictions. And in the Stonecrest area on the east DeKalb County, we have the East Metro CID, which takes in pods of the Stonecrest area. Not all of Stonecrest, just pods. So when and it was in place before we became a city. And now that we are a city, we receive some of the benefits of the East Metro CID. But a part of our charter calls for Stonecrest establishing its own CID, which may well overlap the East Metro CID. And we had a committee in place to address that. And I believe that committee was reconstituted last year to continue working on some type of an intergovernmental agreement with the East Metro CID. And one of the members on that committee was Councilmember Clanton. And he's going to kind of bring us up to date as to where we are with the Stonecrest CID and maybe the East Metro CID. Councilmember Clanton, please.
Thank you, sir. First of all, it's our charter provides for this CID. And for those of you guys who don't know, CID stands for Community Improvement District. Community Improvement District. And these CIDs are self-taxed entities. In other words, they tax themselves to provide for the funding for the projects that they take on within their logistical areas. So in the case of the Stonecrest CID, the way that it is addressed in our charter is listed as Stonecrest Lithonia Industrial CID. And when you look at the East Metro CID, you'll see that East Metro CID protrudes to a large extent into the city of Stonecrest. It actually includes pretty much every bit of the Panola Industrial Park, but none of the Lithonia Industrial Park. And so there is a issue with the city of Stonecrest or the Stonecrest CID working in conjunction with the East Metro CID. For one, we have to look into the legality of having overlapping CIDs. And another thing is how many businesses would buy into being taxed twice. Now, some of the things that you get for the taxation is to these CIDs, they provide for security. They, as in right here in Stonecrest, East Metro CID provided for the license plates reading cameras that was pretty much erected throughout the city. Of course, they didn't forecast to the public where these cameras would be at, and for good reason, but they were throughout, particularly District 1, District 2, and that I know of, and portions of District 3, I believe. Also, they provided for the medium that we see at Turner Hill Road near I-20. And so, so our work began like just right after we became a city. And so our first approach was trying to figure out how we can work with the East Metro CID. They are, they were really open. They attended most of our CID meetings. This last year, we did sort of reconstitute our CID. However, there's a lot going on, so we didn't meet at all last year, but there was a lot of work done still, outside of these meetings. For instance, we approached when I say we, really Attorney Bernard Knight, who is also co-chaired the committee a couple of years ago, and he's actually the chair of the committee this past year. He approached a number of industrial park businesses, and he had, I believe there's 23 businesses that signed on that are interested in the Stonecrest CID, which is good news for that area. So we would really love to extend that area to more of the city, because it would help the city in a number of ways, and it would help the community immensely, because now you're talking about beautification and you're talking about security that doesn't come from the city of Stonecrest funds. So when we start talking about budget issues, we won't have to talk about that as much in these CID areas as they are able to provide for themselves, not wholeheartedly, but in a large part. So right now, where we're at, we have, like I said, we're looking. It's more likely that we will start the CID boundaries. Will start somewhere in probably the Lithonia Industrial Park area, and it may at some point grow. And I think it's my personal opinion that we just get the CID off the ground, and at some point we can work out whatever we need to work out with East Metro CID, whether that would be some sort of collaboration, whether that would be an umbrella type CID presentation, or whatever the case may be. So in the broad scope, that's it for the CID as far as I know. And as far as reinstituting committee, the charter does not provide for a time limit as to how long we need to, how soon we have to put the CID together, but it is provided for in the charter, and it is a worthwhile pursuit. And and we have been working on it. So we're just taking our time and trying to do it right.
Okay, thank you, sir. The reason, and I was one who suggested putting this on the agenda, and that is because there's a committee that supports the CID movement, and there are committees supporting other movements that we need to take a look at. So I think, and I'm suggesting as one council member, that we take a look at some of the most critical committees and prepare to make a case to get them reconstituted in a hurry, so we could get on about the business of handling important projects such as the CID. And if you want to get more detail on the CID, just turn to the charter. There's a detailed information as to what this provides. There's also a great need for the committee on finance. We have another film. Are you a commission or a committee? As a committee working with the film commission.
Right, we're working to become a commission.
But right now you're a committee.
We're still committee, yes.
And that needs to be reconstituted. Very, very important. And about 3 or 4 others that we want to take a hard look at, making the case to get reconstituted in post haste. Okay, any other questions about the CID and reconstitution of committees? You're tired, aren't you? Okay. But we still have another big item on the agenda. But before we move to that item, we did vote at the last council meeting to add protocol for ending a virtual meeting to this work session. And we forgot to do that, but I will save that for last. Department reports. Who's going to take that? Mr. Wheeler, are you standing in for?
Yes, sir. So, yes, sir. So, after speaking to Deputy.
Before you start, may I ask you this? Are these reports also written?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. These reports are going to be a part of the manager's report. So yes, sir. So it will be written. It's so deputy city manager wanted to know exactly what all that the council wanted to be shown in the report, so that we could start adding those into his monthly report as well. So it can all can combine into one and then get it to council once a month.
So we can get a written copy of what you're about to present to us now.
No. We don't have anything to present except we all thing that he wanted to know exactly what would you like to be submitted in this monthly report. What figures? I mean, that's as far as I know at this point.
Well, forgive me. Go ahead with your report.
Mayor Pro, I'd like to piggyback off of what Chris is saying. The report that we've submitted, or that the deputy city manager has submitted, he submitted it for your review. I know that everyone has not had a chance to review it yet, but if you all could review it and send him some feedback on it about what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. He is trying to get a city manager report that everyone is able to read, understand, and answer your questions each month. So I don't know particularly if you want to go through the entire report. It is lengthy tonight, but if you could please go over it and get feedback to Deputy City Manager Pledge Joyner and Alejandro Farrell. He's been working with the city manager on the deputy city manager on this.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Yes, the idea is to.
Hello? Can you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
my bad. I didn't even hear you.
No.
Okay.
No, Council, that is correct. What Megan has stated, as well as what Chris is stating. This is us compiling information from each department. And so that is the report that we've compiled thus far, but based off your feedback, we can add if there's more information you want to see or take away. And I think in his email that he did, when he sent it out, I think he did state that, there's a lot of other, written narratives in some of those departments, just written information, as well as we're looking at possibly getting a new ERP system for the whole city, which can, as the year progresses, will allow us to possibly have a little bit more standardization of the reporting and, make the information a little bit more easily manageable. But this is just our attempts to give you information that y'all been requesting for the last few months and try to get into a format that we at least have for thus far that can be changed at any time. So.
Okay, Chris.
Oh, yes, sir. I was just pretty much going to explain what Megan and now said. Sorry, my microphone is cutting out. My internet is going in and out, so I apologize. I thought I was talking, but then I realized nobody could hear me. So.
Yeah, you have a microphone issues, because I barely got what you said, a portion of it.
I'm sorry. Let me try.
He just said he agrees with what Megan and Al said.
Oh, okay. What they say. Gotcha.
Oh, you still can't hear me? I'm sorry. Let me.
I can hear you, but you're a bit muffled.
Oh, okay. Well, let me keep working on this. I apologize.
But I think we have the gist of the report coming from Mr. Farrell and the city clerk. So you want us to look at the report that players sent, and you may have to send it to me again. I don't recall receiving it. So if you have a copy.
You got it now.
I have it now. Thank you very much, but I'm not going to read it right now.
Send it to me if you would, please.
And from this report, you want us to analyze it and determine if it satisfies some of the questions we've been asking in terms of getting periodic reports.
Yes, sir.
Correct. Some of the information that you will see is call center data, monthly reports that we receive from our call center, by departments, by areas of when they're calling after hours. We're averaging about 1,200 calls a month, even during the pandemic. You'll see information related to building inspections. Again, other departments, what Parks and Rec is doing, what Chris is doing, what code enforcement is doing. There's a financial report from Travis and his department showing, I think, expenditures, the end of the balances and things of that nature. So hopefully it'll give you some insight as to, where we're at, what the city's doing, from the departmental side.
Okay. Anything else to add?
No, sir.
Any questions from council?
Yeah, does that report include building permits that are of general interest to council that may not come through council, but that, like for instance, the Quick Trip in District 2, does it include that type of stuff?
It's just
no
building permit. So it's broken down by residential and commercial, but not specified of what type of building permit and so forth.
So I guess the question, are you asking for like specific locations of permits or by district or by?
No, sir. I'm not asking for that. What I'm asking for is, what I'm asking about rather, is whether or not the report include information that will basically tip us off to potential build outs that we may be concerned with, even though those build outs does not come through city council for approval or through the planning commission. So
so you're asking about projects potentially then, is that correct?
Correct. But particular projects, I want to make that clear. I don't, we really don't need every single, I don't think, other council members may, but I don't think we need every project that does not come through council, but major projects that would definitely affect the landscape and the build out and maybe even community expectations in a particular area. For instance, like the Quick Trip, so not that the community will have, still will have additional time to chime in on the project, but simply so that we would know what to expect in our particular districts prior to sign going up.
Well, what I just heard you say is that once we look at this report and analyze it, then we can say, this does not meet our need. We want to add X, Y, and Z. So if this is something we want to add to your report out, we can add this, can we not?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Right. And that's what this will do. Once we look at it and decide we want to see the Quick Trip type developments to be added as a report that we get on a periodic basis, you want to say monthly, weekly, however, but that'll be a part of our suggestion once we get a clear look at this report.
Correct.
Okay.
Alejandro, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So as far as what you mentioned, Councilman Clanton, this report would show that, let's say there were 12 new construction permits issued, and then it gives you a total bottom line number of how much those permits cost. But no, it would not say that, okay, there was a building permit issued for a Quick Trip on Covington Highway. But if that's something that you would like, then that's what we're asking for on this, is that you could email and say, I would like to know any new building permits that are over, $100,000. That might be a way to break that down as far as a project.
Yeah, there's several. I've worked on the jurisdictions. We've done it by the acre, done it by, like Megan said, valued over $50,000, $100,000, $1 million. It just varied. We did every district. I've been in places where we've done every land development permit in every district. So it just, again, depends on what you want. So we should be able to get, to accommodate that in some form or fashion. Yes.
Right. And I would say to that, I do go on the website all the time, but, I really don't go through every single district, but I definitely pay a lot of attention to District 1. And, and like, for instance, I found out last year that a Circle K was coming to District 1, and that Circle K was already permitted, which means that it would not go through the Planning Commission and it would not come to City Council. but I was appreciative of the fact that I could find that information way ahead of time. So I began to leak the information out. I say leak, but not in a nasty way. I was able to disseminate that information to my constituents to let them know what is coming to the district, and whether or not I support it. And in fact, in this case, I do support it because of the location, because that's what I always say. It's a matter of location. There's a place for almost everything in Stonecrest. The key word is place. And but I appreciate that. But that's the kind of information I want, on a consistent basis, so that I can find that kind of information in a report or someplace. And if you guys can put it in this report, that'll make it easier. But if not, at least make certain that the information is on the website on a consistent basis, which is seen in District 1. I don't know about the rest of it.
Well, and that's fine. I think you mentioned a good point. Like, okay, Circle K. So if there's a question about gas stations, or convenience stores or whatever, if that's something that you want, if that is a concern, I don't know how many Chris may have in the pipeline, truck parking lots, whatever the case may be, we can, like I said, we can get that information as it becomes available. So it's just a matter of y'all tell us what you want. This is just our draft or our initial version of it. We know it's going to change. It's a living document to some degree. So it will definitely change at some point.
All right, should we forward this information to Mr. Joyner, to Chris, to all of you?
I have one more point in reference to the point Councilman Clanton just made. What about the film permits? Because I would like to inform people when there's a film going to be in their area, so they'll know about road closures, they'll know about police and fire and all these other things. Who will be submitting something like that to me? Will that be you, Chris? Will that come under you, Clarence? Or how will I be getting that information? Because I would like to have information about film permitting as well.
That comes under Clarence, and he sends it out to myself and other staff members when they come about. But we can make sure we include that in the process, if that's what you so desire. And just, respond back, as Megan stated, just respond back to Mr. Joyner with any of your additions or what you would want added or deleted. And we'll make sure we, get that information to you.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Other questions? All right, we look forward to reading the report and giving you some feedback.
Oh, great.
All right, the only other item, and it wasn't on the agenda, but we voted at the last meeting to put it on the agenda, and that was we had a resolution in reference to the protocol for ending a virtual meeting. And Councilwoman Grimes, I know you were pushing for us to get this on to move forward with this.
Yes, sir. I just want
any additional comments?
No, I'll just reiterate what I said. I just really think in this COVID era, we need something so that there's no confusion. There's no confusion at all. And so I read through it.
We went through a draft from Mr. Denmark, from a lawyer Denmark, and you had any questions about it? You satisfied with the draft?
Yes, sir. There was one piece, and I think it was number. I'm gonna get my Stonecrest computer working, and I won't have to look on this phone with these glasses for things I can't really see. Hang on.
Well, unless there's some problems with it, then we'll see if council wants to get it on the agenda for action.
That's fine.
Okay, and that's something we have to consider. All right. What did I miss?
Mayor Pro Tem? Oh, yes, let me turn my camera back on. Can we quickly recap what today we are referring to the city council agenda for the 25th?
Okay.
Was there anything on the agenda today that we
like,
yep, it's going?
Councilwoman Cobble, if you'd like, I could go over my notes that I've taken real quick. It shouldn't take more than a minute or two.
Okay.
Yes.
The moratorium of gas stations, we're ready to do the first reading on January 25th. Muni Code, we're going to get those ordinances back on the website and do a little housekeeping and send the ordinances to Muni Code. The 2020 budget adjustments and amendments, we're going to put that in the retreat for more discussion, correct?
Yes.
The purchasing policy, we're not going to put that on the January 25th meeting. We're going to put that on the February, I'm not sure which date. That's
I said subsequent meeting.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the February work session. And the budget.
No, we're going to try to.
Are y'all ready to pass it next week? Week after next?
I wouldn't say that we're prepared to pass it, but we probably need to
discuss it again.
Yeah.
So now that we've had a chance to take a look at these suggested changes, I think we can either agree with them or not agree with them. If we agree with the changes, then I think then we can move for action. But,
so do you want to put it on January?
Yeah, some of us just got those changes, and
right.
We
I don't want to say that we absolutely won't even consider it until February. I think we should at least put it on the agenda and either continue to have discussion about it, be prepared for, more discussion for the 25th. But I just hate to skip a full meeting and not address it.
Well, I think, I believe the reason we did the work sessions was to make sure that those items were ready to be voted on at the next meeting. And that's why it was set up that way. That's the reason why I put it on for the February work session. But if you're ready to put it on the next, the reason why we're doing it this way is so we can shorten the council meetings.
Right.
If it's not ready to be passed, then, or if it's not ready to be voted on, let me not say passed, because if y'all are ready to vote on it, let's put it on the January meeting.
I think if you put it on and we find that there's some problem with it, we can pull it off.
You can defer it. Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll put it on there. The budget retreat, you all are going to send in some good dates to me, and then I will try to get everybody's schedules confirmed. Number 6 was the status updates, the URA monthly reports. We just got a report from Travis, and then I guess we'll have another report in February once that payment is made. The COVID CARES Act, we'll just put that on the next work session. We're not voting on it next. There's no action to be taken. And then the C was the procurement card audit RFP. And that's going to be put on the February work session. Then the Jacobs contract, we're going to discuss more at the budget retreat. Number 8 was the CID, and there was discussion about reconstituting more of our committees. I don't think that's ready to be put on for January 25th meeting, but it's definitely going to be put on in the next work session.
Well, let's say, yeah, but it's going to be dependent on the mayor taking the first step.
Correct.
Let's try.
We'll just keep it going on the work sessions until.
I have a question about the P card audit.
Okay.
If they're opening and scoring this week, do we anticipate not being able to vote on that on the 25th? Because we'll have a recommendation.
That's up to you all. Will y'all be ready to vote on that without seeing who they are and discussing it at a work session?
Oh, we'll see who they are before now and then. Put it on, make a recommendation and put it on. And
Okay.
again, if they're not ready, we just defer it.
Okay.
Yeah, because so I can tell you for me, I would, if we had the 3 if we had the 3 highest scores and then the recommendation out of those 3 sent to us at least 3-4 days prior to that meeting, we could probably be prepared to have discussion and render a decision on the 25th. But if we're not going to have enough time to review what's sent to us before the 25th, then obviously we would not be prepared to.
Yeah, and we just.
I'll put it on January 25th meeting.
Yes.
So we already discussed that. Number 9 was staff reports. Council is going to review the staff report and send in recommendations to Plez, the deputy city manager. And then number 10 was the resolution for ending virtual meetings, and that's ready to vote on January 25th. Did I miss anything?
I think you captured quite a bit, and we thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any zoning that's going to be on the agenda?
Yes.
Definitely.
Oh, well, of course we do, because we only have one meeting. Duh.
Yes, prepare for a long meeting.
So how many items was that?
We'll flow through the voting. I mean, that's the whole point of having this meeting. You know, so I hope we don't disappoint ourselves and get into city council and have these long discussions when we should just be voting. I mean, we have our opportunity already, so it's just up for a vote.
Either we're ready to vote, defer it, or deny it.
Exactly.
You can always call for a motion and then do a discussion at that point, if there is any, and then vote.
Okay.
All right.
And how many zoning cases do we have?
1, 2, 3. I can think of 3. It's 4. Okay.
I know the ones in my district. The
Yeah,
one.
you do.
I know which one.
After tomorrow night, we have what is it? Zoning hearing tomorrow night?
It's Thursday.
Let's move to Thursday. Okay.
Yeah. Tune in.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Anything else? Folks, it was a little bit lengthy, but necessary until we get some committees in place so we can have some lengthy discussions in the committees. And hopefully this process will be shortened as well. Thank you so much for your time. I thank Dr. Ford for her time. Who's on the line that had something to say that didn't get a chance to say it?
Not you, Al. Go ahead and mute.
No, I was just saying Alabama's winning 35-14 or 17. So
okay.
I'm recording the game. I didn't want to know that.
Oh.
I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
4 seconds at halftime.
Tim, we don't need a motion.
All right.
It's a work session, so you can just adjourn the meeting.
Work session is adjourned.
Bye.
Y'all have a